So I went camping with my wife and stepdaughter the other night near Langer, Montana in California. We were off the main road in a secluded route that seldom had cars passing by. No traffic had been through there for a while really, especially not foot traffic. Now I heard a noise late during the night that honestly could be explained logically by something natural that we don't know about. However, my wife and I have both been losing sanity trying to understand what the noise could have been or what could have made the sound. The first instance of the sound occurred around midnight, and we can only describe it as a slow, deliberate, rhythmic nail scratching on a tensioned paracord strip that was strung across the ground. Now, naturally, we thought that maybe it was some kind of critter curious about the tent, but the slowness and rhythm of the noise made us think otherwise, because the critters that generally scratch quickly and sound more hastily aren't like that. The other conclusion that leads us to believe it wasn't a critter is the fact that throughout the night we actually did hear squirrels running around outside, curious of all that stuff that was outside. Why is this detail important? Well, because during the time leading up to the noise and the time afterwards, we heard absolutely no critters running outside or away from the tent. Whatever was creating the sound was absolutely silent coming up to and away from the tent, or eerily enough, may have been floating around something of that nature. We did hear it again around 2 a.m. the same night, and during specific episodes, the noise seemed to have drifted from one corner of the tent, then closer to our heads, allowing us to even feel the vibration of the scratching reverberating throughout the floor of the tent. That's what led me to believe it was the taut paracord because of the vibration, but it was much stronger. We may have heard the noise again a third time, but it was so weak and went on for a small duration compared to the other times that we can't say for sure it was the same thing, but it was really weird. My wife and I were really disturbed by it because it just didn't sound natural for some reason. It was actually loud enough to keep us awake and alert for the rest of the night, but I just don't know what it could have been. I wonder if anybody else has had a similar experience to me, or if they know what this thing could have been. I'll start this off by saying that I grew up completely 100% adamant that the paranormal isn't real. Now, I'd been convinced of this for a long time. I think everything can be rationalized and that people who believe in it haven't really thought about it hard enough. So I live in the Midwest. I live in a small rural lot between a cornfield and a small forest in a camper. I lived in this county my entire life. Honestly, I know all of it like the back of my hand. That being said, I've come to the conclusion that my experiences around the rural and wooded parts of this county are creatures. I'm 100% sure of that. I've had many encounters actually, none back to back, but they happen frequently. There is a forest/park in the middle of town that I always hated going at night since I was little. As I got older, my cousins and I thought getting scared was really fun. We'd go there at night on purpose, but never lasted long. I always felt like I was being watched too. On top of urban legends of people going missing out here at night, it always made me feel uneasy. Fast forward to a few years ago, I got married and am settling into life as a husband. I'd take my large all-black German Shepherd out on walks at night. I always walk towards the park, but I usually don't enter into it. The first time something weird happened was 5 years ago. I was walking further into the woods in the front, and right next to me, to the left of behind where I am, is a neighborhood edge and a small playground which goes silent. The dog actually starts acting really anxious. He's usually very stoic and quiet. He's 120 pounds and built like a tank and looks very intimidating and seems to know it. I hear rustling in the woods following me. It felt like I'm being stalked. I ran home and that's the end of the first encounter. I had a few more encounters like this, but last year things really ramped up. I was on a walk at around 11:30 with my dog, my wife, and our little newer dog. He's a terrier chai mix. We're walking down the same path and about 3 blocks away from the woods, 4 or so deer are sprinting out of the tree lines into the street towards us. and they seem terrified. Then I can hear what I could only describe as which sounds like a human trying to mimic the sounds of a monkey. I thought it was silly until recently when I read another guy's story who heard the exact same thing. We both laughed it off as some kids playing around. Once we get up to the woods and are walking parallel, we clearly see two reflective eyes and a silhouette staring at us down from the tree line. We then heard a deep growl, and then like a hissing sound. It wasn't super high pitched or anything. Both of our dogs acknowledged this as well. One of the dogs starts to growl. Now, around this time, I also got a job as a tour guide / maintenance for the Rao Explorers. I am working there again this year, well around April 1st. Basically, they take unused or tour specific parts of railroad sections that aren't used usually, and they have these pedal carts with motor assist on them so you can explore the tracks. It's super cool and fun. The one I work on is like 5 minutes from where I live, and it goes through the woods to an inaccessible part of the county unless you float down the river and hike up the steep loose dirt hills. You go under one old car bridge, and you go over two multi-100-foot length old train bridges. The first one is larger and taller, and it's about 150 feet off the ground above the forest. The second one goes to the river. About 6 months into this job this fall, we work until midnight sometimes, with the last tour lasting until around 9 PM. That means the last tour for the last 2 months of the year are in complete darkness. The way that the job operates is with 6 employees. 4 get on the lead bike and 2 get on the rear bike. From the lead bike, we drop off 1 person at the busy intersection so they can flag traffic, and 1 person gets dropped off at the large train bridge that goes over to the woods, and the person on the bridge gives us a short safety speech, and that's for the customers really, who stop and go one at a time over the bridge. The employee carts are much faster than the customer ones. We all have walkie-talkies, and we usually have these battery-powered floodlights on stands that we use so customers can see us and also light up safety vests. One particular night, we were behind by 20 minutes or so. Instead of leaving the depot at sunset, we are leaving at dusk. I was stationed at the high bridge. By the time I reached the bridge, it was pitch black aside from the stars providing a little bit of light. My co-workers dropped me off and waited for me until the first customer arrived. I gave the little speech so that the first cart of 4 customers can hear, but they leave and I'm alone now. So, I was alone for about 20 minutes. I used the radio so many times, but it was static for everyone. One of the only times we've ever had an issue like that, actually. Also, I keep seeing movement now up on the tree line, which is pretty weird. Now, I keep hearing fast footsteps around me in every direction. I had the floodlight on above my head, so everybody could know roughly where I was, but I couldn't see anything. I turned off the floodlight and used my personal flashlight. I kept getting these quick glimpses of pale skin moving quickly, but right then, I start seeing stuff that I can't really describe easily. And then, I can hear the next customer coming close. So I turned the light back on and waited for them to come back around the corner. When they pulled up, I noticed that they had a little boy with them and he's scared of the dark. I'm terrified at this point, but try and act appropriate. Even more so because of the boy. I don't want to scare him. Now I'm finishing my speech, but I hear movement right behind me and say, Jesus Christ, and turn around with my flashlight on instinct. Poor kid. I told them it was probably just a deer, and they're good to cross the bridge. That same night, the person stationed in the intersection, now this isn't like a town intersection, it's very rural. It's right next to a massive cornfield. Now he's Native American and very in tune with his culture. He told me privately a few weeks later that he heard rustling in the cornfields and whatever was out there was whispering his name and trying to get him into the field. He was also without communication for about 20 minutes, but he wasn't in the woods and could see a lot better than I could. Another time, me and the same co-worker were heading back to the front of the cart. We were way ahead, so we stopped the car in the middle of the high bridge. It sounds scary, I'm a bit afraid of heights, and The bridge has massive gaps, and between the planks you could fit through. But after doing it every so often you get used to it. It's a clear night and we were watching the stars and having small talk, but then everything goes silent. We are 100 and so feet above the air in the woods and we can hear for miles. Suddenly the dog starts barking from across the river, 2 miles away can be heard. Now, we hear then what sounds like a human mimicking monkey noises. We hear a growl. He looks at me completely serious and in a stern tone says we need to get out of here now. I drive out of there, and he actually moved states to Nevada shortly after this. A few other things happen here and there, and the co-workers had other experiences too. Each of my co-workers has at least one story really. I'm only sharing mine in this post. A few months go by and it's late fall, around the middle of November now. I drive through the park in town a lot when I just want to go for a drive. I had my dog with me and it's around 2 AM. I can't sleep, so I'm listening to some CDs and just have a leisurely walk through the park. But when I get past the gate, I feel uneasy and weird. I get quite scared. Now going to the park that night makes me feel a primitive fear. It's kind of beyond fight or flight. I've never felt that way before, but every time I'm there I have it. So anyway, I get back in and I'm driving through the park now and have the windows rolled up a lot. The dog can still get his head out but can't jump out to go deeper into the woods, but as we go further, I feel scared. I decide not to turn around though because I'm already past the halfway point. Turning around now actually makes us stay longer in the woods. I start speeding though. I round the last corner and I see something that gives me nightmares. There was a pale, skinny, humanoid, tall, lanky, not quite human thing, crawling on its hands and feet, but it was crawling really quick, like at least 20 miles per hour. We don't have bears here. The only animal that size are a large deer. This wasn't a deer. It went from right, crosses the street and went into the tree line. The dog saw it too. Doesn't bark at animals, but he went ballistic. He was trying to force himself out of the small gap of the window, foaming at the mouth and snarling. He never acts like this. I'm actually a certified dog trainer and have raised him from birth. Now most recently, I've become absolutely obsessed with the park. I've walked there at night from my camper to the park with the dog. I'll never do it again. I didn't see a figure this time. As I was entering the park, a massive owl flew over my head, so close it actually could have hit me, and this felt really weird for some reason. As soon as I get into the park, I feel extremely weird, nauseous and anxious. I walk a few hundred yards, and the only streetlight in the entire park's there. I turn around to face the woods. Me and the dog froze for like 10 minutes. The silence is deafening. Anytime I'd hear something, I'd jump. The dog was also anxious too, but kept staring at a certain point way off into the woods. I swear that I could see eyes in there every once in a while. Now, I live in southwest VA in Appalachia, and I heard odd whistling in the woods a few days ago at night. It started when I was playing airsoft alone in the woods at maybe 7 PM. It's almost pitch black. I live in a lonely area. Now, I was walking around the woods by my house. I got to a clearing just on top of a hill and sat down to take a rest. That's when I saw something, and I hear an odd whistling. Well, I kind of saw movement, but I more hear the perfect whistling, and whistle a tune that I'd never heard before. It was clear and close enough, like let's say within 150 feet or less, and come from directly behind me. I wouldn't have thought that it's too far into the woods, but near to the property line with one of the neighbours. Now it instantly gives me chills down my back, and I have a feeling of being watched. I, not being an idiot and having a brain, waste no time in sprinting fully down towards my home, hopping over rocks and things. The whistling then stopped shortly after I start moving, but I felt like I was being watched and something felt off. I didn't see anything. When I did turn back to look, I see the gate that is always open seems to be closed. but it could be because of the darkness I couldn't tell. Now, I don't think it was a bird, and the leaves on the trees wouldn't have regrown yet. Now, it still stays cold at night, and sometimes during the day, but I don't know about the birds really. I also doubt it was a person, as I heard no talking or leaves crunching or talking or any other noise that would have suggested that. I should also mention that while this starts out in the middle of nowhere, it does gradually get louder for some reason. I should also mention that I've been in those woods for a decent amount of my life, and I've never heard anything like that. I mean, not even once. I was a bit tired. Now, I've been more tired before while being up in the woods at similar times before, and I'm not one to hallucinate. The situation still gives me chills when I think about it. I've had the feeling of being watched in these woods, but those feelings have never been so intense and extreme as that before. Now, I was hoping if anybody could help me figure out what it was. An animal? Maybe, but me and my family have dogs around the house and wild animals stay away. I haven't really seen anything outside of a bear or two or so in the woods, but I really don't know what it could have been. Growing up, I'd spent much of my life playing outside with my friends. This is in the days before you had video games and things like that, so it was pretty normal to make your own fun. All I'd have to do is take my bike, and after riding for about an hour or so, I'd be with my friends. I know that sounds like a long time, but I lived out in the backwoods, miles away from cars, so it wasn't really dangerous and it didn't feel so long because you're out in the woods. Now, later in my career, I became a park ranger, so I kind of got used to weird people and weird situations, but this is something that I couldn't explain from my childhood. Now, this actually comes from a number of things that happened to me, which all led to one specific event. So let me begin. So, I was playing out with my friends on one particular day, and one of my friends swears that he's seen a house out in the woods, deep in the middle of nowhere, but he knows exactly where it is. And he says, "God, there's a woman that haunts it and it's so scary. I really need you guys to see it." Now, we knew he wasn't making it up because when his brother came back from vacation, he was also saying the same thing. So one day we set out to find this. We had our bikes with us originally, but had to quickly dismount them. We decided to leave them because we knew it was going to be too difficult to proceed. There were rocks and things everywhere, so it was going to be really a headache to travel with them, so we decided not to. Now, we do notice some people further up also on bikes, and one, we have no idea how that they could have been on bikes out here because of how rough the terrain is, and two, we've seldom seen people here, so we thought it was a pretty bizarre thing, but we don't think too much of it and continue on. Now, funnily, this friend almost immediately gets lost and can't figure out where it is. He's basically adamant to not give up on trying to find it, but he doesn't really have a clue of where he's going. The nature's very nice though, but we're on quite a narrow path which is quite sheer. If you fell, you wouldn't really break anything, but you'd definitely get hurt. I've actually had the honour of falling in once and it wasn't fun. I ended up getting quite a lot of cuts and things and messed up some of my clothes, which was quite annoying. Now, after not too long, my friend finally gives up and says we're not going to find this place. I say yeah, that's fine, and we decide to start heading back. Now, I kid you not, just as we've started to turn around, we hear a really deep banshee type scream, one that echoes off the surrounding hills. It was far too loud to be a person. At the very least it would have been a large animal, but upon listening to the scream over the 2 seconds it lasted, you could hear some distinct words being spoken, and that was to get out. It's very hard to really figure out exactly what this voice was saying because I had so much adrenaline that I just couldn't focus on what I was hearing. But I look at my friends, and my friend who then led us out there confirmed that yes, he actually heard the same thing. Now we're panicking. As you can imagine, being young kids, we basically scream too and sprint out in the opposite direction. The best part about this is that we don't really know where we're going, and we ended up getting more lost in the woods. Now it ended up getting really bad because it starts to get dark, and one, I don't want to lose my bike. My parents have only just got me it, and growing up I really didn't have much money. So if I lost a bike it was going to be a big thing, but yeah, I really couldn't find it, and that was quite worrying. And two, I didn't want to be out here in the dark with the demon. And my parents were going to kill me if I wasn't back in time. Filled with more rage now, I start strutting around trying my very best to find where the bikes could be, and thankfully we found them. Now we all split off in our different directions, and none of us really say anything. We're just rushing to try and get back home. I've never pedalled so hard in my life because I was absolutely convinced that the demon thing was going to chase after me. I know now it could have just been a person out there, or maybe a large animal. That was probably the biggest threat, but I guess back then you really don't think like that. So I was pretty concerned by this, and I well and truly didn't feel comfortable. I just knew that I had to find my way home safely. So I get in and I get banned from being on my bike for a while, which was really annoying. I didn't really explain what had happened to my parents. I knew I was going to be grounded, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be a lot worse for me if I say what's actually happened. I know looking back on it now, I should have probably explained because it could have been a really dangerous situation. Who knows what was out there that day? Well, I'll tell you who doesn't know, me. So now fast forward a couple of months. My friend is still going on about us trying to find this place, and I kind of didn't want to this time. Normally I'm one of the real adventurers in the group, but I just couldn't be bothered. I didn't want to lose my bike luxuries again because I've just lost them, but he persists, and I guess we had nothing better to do, so I say sure. Now, I remember the day that we're going to set off again. He said that he knows the exact place this is. You know why? He said he had a dream about it. Being young, I really bought into this and thought, you know what, this time we're actually going to find it. So, we're riding down the path this time. We're actually on the more concrete area which leads into the main part of the forest, and we were going really quick. Next thing I know, I'm hitting the ground hard. My hands are stinging and something was off. I realised that I've crashed on my bike. I'd stupidly tried to go off onto what appeared to be a more flat part of the path, but I've gone straight over a big stone and ended up getting some cuts on myself. I didn't worry too much about it though. I was sat down for a while, and I tell my friends that they should just go on without me and that I need to get back home. I was young, but I was still quite concerned by this and ruining my clothes. I didn't want to get blood all over them. I know I have to get back to my mum. Now my friends, being the great friends they are, say sure and head off without me and leave me there. I look at the bike and it seems a little bit stuffed at first. I can't get the wheels to turn, so I ended up just laying there for a while. Now that's when I noticed someone. There's an elderly woman approaching. She's coming from just beyond the tree line up to my right. I look ahead and see if my friends are there to confirm if they're seeing this too, but they aren't. They're long gone. I'm a little bit worried now and very hastily get up and start trying to make my bike move. I'm trying to get the wheels to work, but I just can't seem to do it. For some reason I had a feeling that she was coming to help me, but she gets a little bit closer and just stops, smiling at me. Now she has some of the most jagged and rotten teeth that I've ever seen before. It's like this person had never seen a toothbrush in their life. Weirdly, their clothes didn't seem too dirty, considering that she's just come from the forest and surely they should have some markings on them. She's wearing a kind of dark coloured dress, but it looks pretty immaculate. If I had to guess her age, I'd say she's probably about 70 or 75. I'm not too sure. I wave at her and don't get anything back. I then say hello, and suddenly her expression changes, looking completely blank, almost like it's looking through me. Now that was creepy. I can't really make out much about her eyes because she has pretty bloodshot eyes, so I quickly get my bike, pick it up, and thankfully the wheels start moving while I'm walking. I look over my shoulder, and I can still see her there watching me. For some reason I wasn't overwhelmed with fear by this, as I know a lot of people might be. This is kind of uncharacteristic for me too, because often I am the scaredy cat, but not in this situation. I start pedaling slowly at first, but I then see that she's still there staring at me, and as you can imagine, I picked up the pace pretty promptly. Now I ended up getting back home, and my mum's very concerned about me. Annoyingly, she put this stinging stuff all over my cuts. I mean, it's probably antiseptic whatever, but my god, did it burn like I've never felt a burn before. Honestly, it almost sent my whole body into shock how strong this stuff is. It was so much so that I'd actually forgot about what had happened until my mum asked again. I say I crashed over the stone, and then the lady come. My mum says, "What lady?" and asks me to describe her. And I explain everything that happened, and she looks at me kind of weird. She knows that there's no cars around there for miles. It's just the paths. You might get the odd truck, but it was very uncommon. She tells me that if ever I see that lady again, to come straight back and don't try and talk to her. I say, "But Mum, I couldn't even talk to her." I get the reply of, "I don't want to hear it." I'm then grounded and lose my bike privileges again. So it's starting to get quite irritating now. So not only are my friends out having this great adventure, I've crashed my bike on flat ground, hurt myself and got grounded again. I was pretty worried now because usually my mum does the 3 strikes and you're out kind of way of things. If I lose a bike again, I don't know if I'll see it again. So I'm pretty upset. Now eventually my mum does release me from her prison and I'm allowed to go out. And I catch up with my friends and ask them what happened. They then say that they still couldn't find it, and I started laughing. They then ask why I'm not allowed on my bike, and I explain, and my friend says, "That's her. That's the lady who lives there." I say, "What do you mean?" He says, "The lady that haunts the house, you saw her." And I'm not buying any of it. I say, "The day I believe you is the day I see the house." And what happens? Nothing for the next 2 months. Until eventually, I get my bike back and it's time to go out once more. In the time without my bike, I'm actually super bored because I'm basically stuck indoors all day, and I'm just watching the days go past. I did get some video games in, so I just killed hours on it, but it couldn't compete with being with my friends. Now, we decide that we're going to set out one last time to try and find this house. Again, I really don't believe it's there. I don't believe any of it's true, but my friend constantly goes on about it. So now, we get on that path once again, and this time I'm constantly scanning the ground. I'm very scared to go over another rock again and get hurt. It's not actually the feeling of crashing that actually bothers me, it's more the fact that I don't want to have a crash and get that stinging stuff on me. The thing was, at this point, even if we did find anything, I was sure to just lie about it, because I think, what's the point of telling my mom about what's happened if I'm only going to get grounded again? So I swear that no matter what happens, I'm not going to tell her anything. Now we were riding for miles and miles, and eventually my friend said, "Stop," and we all stop. He says, "Leave our bikes here." We take them off to the side and actually throw them into the bushes so people can't find them. They're pretty well concealed now, which is something we're all happy about. Now we get up and we start going through the woods on this little path. My friend is absolutely convinced and certain that this is the way that we need to go to be able to get away from everyone, and finally find where this house is. He says, "This is it. This is what I found before." None of us really believed him, but I guess being gullible, part of us wanted it to be real. Now, we walked for miles and miles, and we still don't seem to be getting any closer to anything. I tell him, "Really, is this actually a thing, or is it just a figure of your imagination?" He then says, "Be quiet." And I don't. I just keep on going until eventually, there it is. In a break in the trees, you can see an old white house. It kind of looked like an old English cottage, but slightly bigger. It certainly looked old and very abandoned. It was 2 stories tall, and looked like nobody had been there for as long as I had been alive, at least 5 times over. Now at this point I get a little freaked out, but my friend is persistent that we have to press forward to find it. We have to go in there. We have to know that it's real. I agreed, kind of getting more and more excited at this time. As we start to step towards it, a crow must have broke out of a tree nearby, and it really made us jump. All of my friends are laughing at me for being so scared, but I don't know, I felt extremely on edge in this situation, and it's kind of like something I haven't felt before for a long time. Even working now as a ranger, I still haven't had that feeling. I think I was too on edge. I was too ready for something to happen. Now we go a little bit further ahead, and then I can see some kind of movement. It almost looks like there's a cat or something in one of the top windows moving round. It's all black, I can't see eyes, but I knew something was in there. I think maybe it's an animal. And we continue going forward. I don't know, I'm getting a really bad feeling about this, one of my friends says. But again, we say that we've come this far and that we need to figure out what this is. And so we press forward even more. Now eventually we get up to where the door was, and I, probably being the bravest at the time, decided to step in first. And this place smelled really weird. It was kind of like an old smell. One that I hadn't smelled before, and something smelled really bad in there. I didn't know what it was. I kept on and on searching for the source of the smell, but I really couldn't find anything. So that was something quite strange. I just expected either something to jump out at me constantly, or to see some kind of dead animal or thing there to make sense of the smell, but again, there's nothing. Now, I decided to go up the stairs to see what else is up there, and this place looks like it is from about the 1800s. There's no furniture or anything. There is a picture on the wall, but it's all faded off and you can't really see what it once was. I don't think it was a picture, but some kind of portrait, but it's gone now. I then see a big spider go up the wall, and I really don't like that. I'm looking for the cat though, and I can't find it. I think this is odd, so I continue my search. I was sure I saw something in here. Even if it wasn't a cat, I just had the urge to know exactly what it is and just figure out what was going on up here. Now, I end up going further ahead, and while my friends are down, I realise that there's an upstairs area. There are stairs that go up another level. I go up the stairs and I can see a suitcase. I don't see anything else there, and I decide that I'm going to open it up. I have to know what's in here. Even if it's bugs or something, I really want to know. As I go to open it, I hear a sound behind me. It's movement. I'm not bothered, I think that it's one of my friends, and I slowly turn around, and there I see it. A woman crouched in the corner, staring at me. I then realise this is a woman that I saw before, and she slowly smiles at me. I drop the suitcase down immediately. It startles me, but not her. One of my friends then joins me on the stairs and screams the second he sees the woman. Something about her didn't look real or human. The next thing I know, we're sprinting down those stairs. They felt impossibly long. It was almost like it had doubled in length. My other friends were also screaming now, and we all come flying out of the house. saying, "What was that? What on earth was that?" I say I don't know, and we start explaining to the others what we saw. One of my friends is constantly looking around and he swears that he can see someone staring at us out of the window. We don't bother looking around. Me and the guy who saw it, we just keep running. We were surprisingly fit as we probably made it about 500 meters before slowing down again. We all stopped for a moment, now feeling safe that we were away from the house, saying, "What did we see?" No, none of us can agree on exactly what we saw. We keep looking around to where the house is, but weirdly we can't find it. I know that we run off and we're quite worried and disorientated, but we should be able to see the house, so it doesn't make sense why it's not there. I start to kind of lurch backwards a bit as I realise that the fear's really taken a toll on me. It's like my vision's gone a bit weird. We then start moving again. We start running as quick as we can, and we're trying desperately to locate our bikes. We eventually come back to the main path, but our bikes are nowhere to be found. Of course not, how could we possibly find it out here? How are we going to be able to differentiate it from the surroundings when everything looks the same? We didn't think of this at the time. I didn't even care about the bike. Now the thing that makes this suck is it's going to be a long journey back without the bikes, but we just can't find them. I do want to search for a bit longer, but my friends are all too scared, and we take off running again. We don't get too far as we're really tired now, and we have to start walking. What's worse is we've got about 2 hours of daylight now ahead of us. We're all discussing, running through the probabilities of what it was, and suddenly I get annoyed at the friend saying, "Why didn't you tell me that was there?" He says, "I can't know what's up there, I've never been in there before." We all look at him then, kind of annoyed, as if to say, "Well, why didn't you let us know that before?" He doesn't reply though. And eventually, we get to the part where we have to split ways. We all say goodbye to each other, and I watch my friends go off in different directions. I don't know why, I just felt the need to stop there for a second or so, just to try and figure out or at least make sense of what had happened, but I can't really make sense of anything. I then think, God, my bike, this isn't good, I'm going to be in so much trouble, and I start to fabricate an excuse to my mum as to what's happened to my bike, so at least then maybe she won't be too annoyed at me. It was stolen, that's it, I'm going to tell her it was stolen. Eventually, after a 2-hour walk, I get home just before the sunset. My mum can see me without my bike and says, "What happened?" And "It was stolen, Mum. I think a kid's stolen it." Weirdly, she wasn't annoyed at all. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, honey. We'll get you another one. Dinner's ready." I'm really surprised, and I take my food and go and sit in my room to eat it. Now fast forward to all these years later, and even in my current line of work, I've never seen anything so strange, and I still can't really make sense of it all. I don't know what I could have possibly seen up there. I'm just glad that I wasn't the only person to have seen it, and somebody else did, because if it was just me, I probably wouldn't have believed it. I've done lots of different things in my time, and I've kind of lived lots of different lives, I guess you could say. I'm always one who's up for adventure and trying new things that are different and unique to me, and I find those very exciting. I have landed a current career which I'm in, and a job that I actually quite like. So is my wife too, which is great, but I didn't always do this job. I was talking to a new colleague at work, and we got talking about what kind of jobs we're doing before, and it really got me thinking, yes, of when I was a park ranger, the reason that you're all here listening to this. Well, for a few years after finishing my school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and there was a program that would send me to a different state. Long story short, I ended up staying there and I actually really like it. I'm actually still here today. After a couple of years of being in the state, I ended up signing up to become a park ranger. I actually had a few jobs though at the same time to get more money. I wanted to save up enough to be able to go to college, and luckily I was able to eventually, which is my career I have now. but at the time it seemed like worlds away, and I actually become a waiter. I hadn't done it before and the pay was not the best, but the good thing is we got lots and lots of tips and that was pretty cool. The problem with the job is that it's almost like if you did enough mistakes, they would just get rid of you very quickly, but it was easy to do in a high-paced environment like this. Sometimes you literally couldn't even go to the bathroom, which I think was a bit ridiculous, but hey, it is what it is. I loved this job, and I really liked the environment. I remember when we'd wake up, there were some large animals like deers and things like that would always come up to where we were staying in the main facility. You actually had to be really careful of them sometimes, especially if it was their rut season when they were looking to reproduce, because the males would get very aggressive, and you had to be careful. The other problem too is tourists would always stop their cars and try and take pictures and stuff, but they were just kind of oblivious to the danger of it all. And yeah, it was actually really dangerous to be there, so you well and truly had to watch out. Now I didn't mind though, but like I said, the job didn't pay that much money, but it was very close to my other job which I absolutely loved, which was being the ranger. I found it good, but I almost feel like I was doing so much that I couldn't appreciate the things that I had around me. It's something I still have now, but it was almost like I was a spring compressed and I couldn't really appreciate everything for what it was. But as soon as I got out there doing my ranger job, I'd very quickly forget about the stresses of being a waiter, and that was good. I could also soon forget the fact that being a waiter wasn't a permanent thing. It was kind of like temporary for the time, and I knew that, just I couldn't convince my brain of it. So I head out on some of my normal patrols and everything's grand. There's lots of people out here that I actually become friends with, and I'd get some regulars there who would just hike the trails. It was a pretty cool place to go hiking if you ever get out to these kinds of places, and I'd really recommend it to people who haven't tried it yet. I remember though, there was some weird smell that none of us could seem to escape from. It was almost like sulfury, but kind of different. Almost metallic at the same time. It's the kind of thing that was almost like sharp and it would make your nose feel cold. It was pretty weird. I wasn't the first to discover it, but I wasn't the last, and I remember some other staff reported it too. Apparently this actually happened in other places and not far from the restaurant that I was waiting in. And I thought, you know what, this is a bit weird. I was quite paranoid and thinking too scientifically in the presumption that it was a dangerous chemical that we weren't supposed to smell but could, or something leaking from the ground. I was paranoid maybe it was radon gas, but I didn't realise that you couldn't actually smell that, and we're in the open air anyway. My scientific knowledge has come a long way since then. Now, eventually, the smells seemed to go away, and things seemed to return back to normal. I was finishing up one of my shifts doing the waiting, and I was washing some dishes, and I noticed something strange. Outside of the window, a bit further away, I could see some kind of faint glow. I don't really know how to describe it. It was almost like a reddy colour, but had more of a green tinge to it. At first I presume it's a fire, but it doesn't act like how a fire would. I don't know, it just felt a little bit different. It looked kind of weird, and a little bit creepy actually. I just convinced myself it was nothing. I finish up on my washing and go outside to see what it is, then I realise that it's gone. I'm pretty sure it's some kind of reflection or something that I didn't realise is there, so I just go back to what I was doing. I remember just thinking, God, I can't wait to just escape and let my mind settle. I was kind of aware of the compression spring thing that I was talking about earlier where I was doing too much, but I was kind of just going with it at the same time, but I knew I needed to get out of there and just have a few hours at least of peace just to clear this up. Now eventually, these smells do pick up again, and weirdly, somebody else reported seeing a strange light in these woods. Now, this particular colleague reported them differently, saying that it seemed to be coming as more of a green embery glow, almost like where a fire once was, or just when you get the embers before something like that's about to die. He said that he just had a weird feeling like something was off. It was like all of his adrenal glands were firing and he just didn't know why. He said the smell was accompanied by it too. So now, I'm pretty convinced that it's just something we should be careful of, but nothing too harmful. I was paranoid again it was radioactive, just because, like I said, not the best at science then. And I thought, well, why else would it be glowing? Or maybe it's some kind of chemical fire, I don't know. I thought somebody had been stupid and actually left something out there and not told us. Or maybe somebody was illegally burning trash or something. And yeah, that was what I went with and a lot of the team did. We were pretty sure people were burning some kind of plastic that they really shouldn't have been, and that would explain the weird characteristics of this light and its glow. Now the thing is, we couldn't find it. We searched for quite a long time, and my god, we get to know the area well, so if there was anything there that shouldn't have been, we would have picked it up, but we couldn't see anything. We even had some cops actually putting in a report that they thought somebody was out there, because they said they saw something strange. They described it as a couple of lights moving and then suddenly vanishing, describing it this time as a kind of purple colour with a green one, but the green remained throughout. I could probably link the colour more closely to almost like a neon kind of green, but it's hard to describe. Now, another strange characteristic of this is that one of my colleagues said that his eyes genuinely burnt when he saw this. He actually got the closest out of all of us to whatever this is. He said that he was probably about 50 feet away, and he couldn't look at it, almost like the way that you can't stare at the sun or bright reflections or things like that. But he said he felt enticed to. Almost like everything went black around him and he just had that to stare at. I even noticed some vision problems too. I remembered after seeing this that I would look at a tree and it just looked like it was artificially placed there, almost like it had a stage light coming down onto it which wasn't there, and it just looked too high definition compared to the other trees. It was kind of trippy but pretty bizarre to pick up. And some of the other colleagues had the same thing too. Weirdly, it was also the same people who smelt whatever that was. Now, in a weird way, I actually began looking towards having my night shifts because, well, I'm going to encounter something pretty cool out here. At least that's what I was telling myself. The sense and urge to have adventure was still quite strong at this point in my life, so I'm up for it. Didn't have a wife then, didn't have a kid, and not many responsibilities, and the world was absolutely my oyster at this moment in time. Now, what to do other than chase this thing? Well, nothing. So I set out. I made a commitment to myself that if I actually saw this thing and can get within touching distance, then I'm going to be the first. If my eyes hurt, then yeah, it's time to stop and go back, but I was ready. And then nothing. For the next 2 weeks straight, absolutely nothing happened. I actually grow more and more tired of trying to hunt this thing. It's kind of like the perfect anticlimax where that your motivation is going on a negative correlation constantly spiraling down till you can't be bothered. And I couldn't be bothered. I was actually planning a trip to get away to Europe, and that starts to consume my thoughts and everything. And I decide that I'm going to think better if I'm not tired and decide to plan it more in the day. So now I'm out there less in the dark anyway. So I'm doing my usual rounds, just investigating something that I needed to, and just going out, doing what we do, when I notice it. There's almost like a burning on my neck. It kind of feels like I'm getting a sunburn, and the smell has come back. I turn around slowly, and I see it, just for 1 second. Glowing almost too bright to be real, in a weird golden colour, Something is standing there raising its arms up to me. It doesn't really look like a person. It almost looks like it's wearing some kind of robes, but it doesn't have a head. I can describe them as white but with gold detailing around the side, but it looks very alien. Almost like something which has come from a very wealthy thing, but not like anything on Earth, and something that's somehow spiritually higher than the rest of us. And then it vanished, almost like it was never there in the first place. I'm completely perplexed, trying to figure out what was that. I rubbed my eyes for a few seconds, and that's when I noticed something really strange. I can still see the silhouette of this thing burned into my eyes while they go back to normal. Okay, that's really odd, I think. Something was definitely off about this situation. I'm pretty sure my head isn't powerful enough for me to imagine that, and I wasn't even thinking of it. Last time I checked, I'd never seen anything like this, so what was I seeing? I look around, and there's almost like a mist that's formed. It's kind of like an extremely light fog, but I can see it everywhere. Again, it's not just my vision going weird, because I can clearly see that it's not in all areas. So what was it? I decided to head back now. I ended up finishing the rest of my tasks, and I get into our base. I start talking during my lunch break and tell one of my colleagues about what happened. He said that he's seen something similar too. But what's more strange is that he said that he'd seen this in a dream, which I think is really weird. I asked him to describe it, and he's pretty much describing literally exactly what I'd seen too. Now that's pretty creepy, I think. Or is it something higher up? We start to discuss all kinds of possible things, guardian angels and God knows what else, but I'm a little shaken. And I eventually get back into my car and drive home and forget about it and start another shift at the restaurant. Now when I'm doing the dishes this time, I can't help but look out of the window, and for a second I'm sure I see a green flash of light and then nothing. Now again, I think this is pretty bizarre, but I try not to think of it too much. I convince myself that I've been going too hard, pushing to the absolute max, and this is what's happened. My body's just gotten tired. Maybe I was doing too much. Maybe 2 jobs at the same time is not the best for me. Maybe, just maybe, I can slow down for a bit and life will take its hand for me. But I can't do that. I have to keep pushing. But I have to find out what this thing is. It's really starting to bother me now. I wouldn't say I'm naturally an anxious person, but I was starting to feel a bit weird about everything. It almost felt like these strange occurrences were becoming all-consuming. Kind of like the people you get on the ghost TV shows when they say that the ghosts don't leave them, or poltergeist, or, you know, them things. I was getting a bit worried now because I thought, well, why can't I separate from work? Why am I thinking of this while I go to sleep? Why am I seeing it in my head so much? I felt like time was against me and I just needed to get to the bottom of it. So I continue onwards once more. I continue on to another shift, and just as I do so, as I'm handing over from the other guys, they say, "Hey, did you hear about what happened?" I say yeah and talk about a sports event that happened recently, but they're like, no, the light, that thing that you saw, somebody else saw it. I say, what do you mean? And apparently Raymond has seen the same thing as me. He's one of the other staff there. Apparently, he was out there doing his role when suddenly there's a bright light behind him. He turns around to see a tall figure wearing some white coloured gown, but this time associated with a more green glow. Again, can't see its face. It's too bright where its face should be, and it vanishes within a second. Now, I was happy I wasn't the only one seeing this, but apparently my colleague had actually got really shaken up by this, and that's somebody who never seems to care about much of anything. Well, I think I really want to find out what this is now. All of us agreed to stay well back and call law enforcement because clearly if we encounter this thing, it's something that we're definitely not trained to deal with and don't want to deal with in the first place. Now me on the other hand, I'm the adventurer. I want to be the cool one who can just go after things and not be scared. It's weird thinking back now on how my mind was at the time, but that was my mind, so if I've got to investigate, then I've got to investigate. So I set out, and I start doing my job. Now again, things are normal. The next 3 days, nothing really happens. The only thing that was a bit weird was the mist seemed to pick up again, but because of the weather, I'm not really sure whether it is naturally occurring or not, but it felt strange. Now, on the 4th night, however, just as the sun goes down, I head out and something feels different now. It almost felt too perfect. The forest was a little bit too quiet compared to normal, and it kind of scares me. I don't know why, it just freaks me out. Something about it was just off. Now, as I set out, I almost have that feeling like when you're in a dream. You know when you get to that fatigue point where your brain's kind of shutting down but you're still going? It was kind of like that. And I'm met with the smell again. I'd genuinely forgotten about the smell for a long time, but here it is again, and it instantly wakes me up. The smell seems to be getting stronger and stronger as it goes deeper into the woods. Now this area that I'm in, you can't actually see much further around the bend because how the path twists. The trees are quite thick at this point in time, so you don't really have much time to react to things or people which will come up on the path or trail behind you. It's okay. Sometimes it's kind of comforting because you know it's the same for whatever else is out there. But this felt different this time. It kind of gives me an uneasy feeling like I need to know what's about to happen next. The smell is ever increasing to the point that I put my shirt over my nose and continue on like that. Luckily my undershirt's quite long so it reaches my nose easily. And I stop in my tracks as I can see a faint green glow. I can't figure out where it's coming from, and I suddenly realise that it seems to be from in all directions now. I realise that I must be right on the trail with this thing, and I continue on until eventually it seems like the green light is fading now. I look around once more, but there's still nothing here for me. Again. But that's when I see it. It's almost blindingly bright. I can see a much brighter glow this time. It seems to be coming from a specific location now and getting brighter every second, and I pivot myself and I'm able to see it now. I'm met with something that's about 7 feet tall, almost appearing to have some kind of green robe on this time, mixed with white and gold, far too bright, and clothes which are flowing as though that they're stuck in the wind but there's no wind. The closer up towards whatever this thing's face is, the brighter it gets and the more my eyes hurt. It does this to the point that I can't make eye contact with whatever this is, if it does have eyes that is. I get this horribly overpowering feeling that whatever this is far too superior to me, and can literally do whatever it wants to me, and I can only be here, left to face it. Now I don't know exactly how long that I was stood there for, but it gets to the point that I physically can't look at it, and I actually drop onto the ground trying to cover my eyes. It's so bright that I can actually see my bones through my fingers, and just some red around where my skin is, and suddenly there's darkness. I think I went blind for probably about 5 or so seconds because of how bright this thing was, until I'm able to actually see again. I then quickly get up and look around and everything's how it should be, just the smell, that awful smell is still there. I pick up quite a good pace and I start running out of there fleeing. Luckily I was only about 20 minutes away from the station, and I get there in about 5 minutes or so. I was flat out exhausted when I get back to the station. Nobody else is there and it's only me at this time. I very quickly write down everything that's happened and I try my absolute best not to panic too much. Now, the more that I calm down, the more I can actually see what I'd seen in my head. For probably a millisecond, I was finally able to see this thing clearly, and it seems to have horns with gold tips at the end and glowing eyes. I don't know what I'd seen, but it really terrified me. I ended up calling my best friend and describing what happened, and he said it might have been some kind of spirit that I encountered. I was very scared, and I actually radioed in to all colleagues in the surrounding areas to look out. Now, what was really weird is I get a call to say that I've got to see my friend now. He doesn't say what's happened, but he says that I have to come quick, so yeah, that's exactly what I done. Now, when I'm eventually able to make it over to him, that's when he tells me what he saw. He describes it as a tall figure, also with horns, kind of staring at him, and it was an incredibly bright thing and green coloured and glowing. And we both realised that what we saw was the exact same thing. Now, in this moment, I know that we have to keep going and doing our job, but we saw something really weird. We let everybody else aware of it, and we're hyper aware for what it could possibly be. Over the following weeks, there's fewer and fewer sightings of the glowing embers until eventually there's nothing. All these years later, I still have no idea what I saw to this day. I really hope that I don't ever have to see whatever that thing is again, because I don't think I've decided that it's now time to share my story. I don't want to be one of those people where I have lots of stories and things to tell people and share, but I never get round to it in my life. That wouldn't be a good thing. I'm kind of setting myself up to fail if I have that approach, I think, so I just get down to what's important, really. Yeah, I'm worried that I'll die and my stories will go with me. To be honest, for a long time, I didn't want to tell too many people too many of the things that I'd experienced because, you know, even if it's as plain as day, they'll say, oh, you're just seeing things or you're just trying to make out something that's not really there. It's kind of annoying, really. But yeah, I know I've not got that many years left to live. I've had a good life, and I guess one that eventually found a lot of happiness in. So for my job, for quite a while, I actually used to have to go out and rescue people. Every so often people would wander off into the woods basically and become completely lost out in the snow, and it was my job to go and rescue them. Well, there was a few other people that we worked with in the teams, and I'd like to share some of the weird experiences that we had, and some things that I saw that I think might be interesting to you all. So let me cast you back now. We're sitting at the station, and we don't have any call-ups, so we go home. We are actually able to get contacted while at home though, so we knew it wasn't completely being out in the clear. I mean, basically you had to be close enough to the job that you could actually go back if you needed to actually go and make a difference with things. So I get back home, and it's one of those drives where that I kind of need the time just to think clearly. You know, like the nighttime drives people do. I think I used any time that I was driving just to sit and reflect in silence. I found a lot of peace from doing this, really. So yeah, that's how I was getting on with things. Now, after not too long of doing this, I get back home and I feel quite happy. I get in though and realise that the heatings went off, but that doesn't matter. I can start the fire, so I quickly go outside to get some wood and things, and I start doing that. While I'm out there, I'm met by another person. I say, hey, how are you? Just trying to be nice. I realise that he hasn't replied, and I look up again, and that person is gone. I think that's odd. I thought maybe it was a new neighbour who was just nervous about being there or something. I don't know, people get weird though sometimes, especially when you live in a place where there aren't too many other people around. I don't know why, it's just an opportunity for some people to be quite weird, I guess. So anyway, I get the wooden things that I need and I just start cracking on. I head back inside and I start making my fire. It's quite a nice one. I go lay down in my chair and I wake up to a phone call. I open my eyes and the fire's quite big now. I'm kind of glad that I woke up. I need to tend to it and poke it back into place. The place that I live in isn't designed very well, and it's probably a big fire hazard. I think today you wouldn't be allowed to design things like this, but basically if you put enough wood into the fire and it becomes big enough and you don't control it, it kind of spreads out and it's quite close to the wooden floor. I'd actually seen it melt some things before and it wasn't very good. So after doing that, I quickly go over and pick up the phone. They say, "Hey, we got something we need you guys to come back for. Can you do it?" I say, I don't know. I'm pretty exhausted at this point. I noticed that I was getting a strange feeling in my neck and feeling breathless, and it's one of the signs that I'm actually a bit exhausted. So with this in mind, I say, "Is there no one else that can do it?" I know some people are probably thinking, "Oh, that's not a kind and caring person," but honestly, if you're to do a job like this and you understand that yes, you give your life to this thing, but you also get exhausted from it. I think burnout with these kinds of jobs is very common, and I was definitely feeling it that day. But they haven't got anybody else who can go out to help the team, so I kind of reluctantly agreed. So I now basically pack up all of my things and quickly put out the fire. I'm a bit anxious about putting out the fire though, to be honest. I just have a bad feeling this time. I don't know why, I just couldn't really shake it. But I get everything together and head off. I grab a newspaper because I know I'm probably going to be bored at some point during this and we're going to have breaks, so that's fine. Annoyed that I forgot my coffee, I curse a little bit but head into my truck and get going. The lighting seemed worse this time on the way back, but I put it down to the fact that I was most definitely tired at this point. I was just tired of all kinds of things really. I needed a break, but here I am, still going, still pressing forward, trying to tell myself that I'll get a break soon, but I just keep on and on getting called out, and it's just not good enough. But hey, I signed the dotted line, nobody had me at a knife point doing so I go. It's probably good it was a bit of a drive for me to get there, because I think this definitely helped calm me down in the process. Yeah, I needed that really. Just to be able to calm down enough to actually get out and start to do things. So yeah, I feel a bit better when I actually arrive back and we get the download. Apparently somebody is injured out there. They might even have thought that a bear attacked them or something. They had reports of screaming and then some blood trails, but that was all they knew. I think to myself, great. Is this it? Is this the end? I was jokingly thinking of this unoptimistically to myself, but there was actually some truth to the sarcasm of which overcast my mind at that moment. I felt like I was kind of spellbound to have something bad happening. Do you ever get moments in your life where you feel like everything's playing out like it's some kind of movie or something, and you're just watching it play out in front of you and you know things are going to happen but you don't have control of it? Yeah, it's kind of like that. The next thing I knew, I was out there. I'm walking up a snowy staircase. We basically have a staircase which leads us out into the part of the forest which is designated for us, the rescue workers. It's basically from here that we can go further and further in, much further than other people are allowed to go. In fact, when you get to the end, there's a sign saying stop, turn around, no civilians. Of course, I have to ignore this and just go through, so that's what I start doing. As I closed the gate and I turned around, I could swear that there was somebody who was standing at the very far end of where I'd come from, just kind of motionless. I thought maybe it was a civilian or something. I mean, civilians could come up to this point, so I didn't have a problem with it. But I thought, oh man, I just hope that there's nobody else to get lost out here. My self-talk was pretty atrocious at this point, but there wasn't too much of which I could do in particular to change it. So here I am, off I go, into the snow. The snowfall at this point was really beautiful. I should make note of that. When there's enough wind, it kind of just dusts off the top layer of snow, and it's really a beautiful thing. I kind of look good here. I start to relax a bit and head off in the general direction. Now the thing is, we didn't really use radios. The technology wasn't so great at the time for these, at least where we were, because of the thick trees and stuff. But I didn't have an issue with this. I knew the area well, very well. In fact, that's how we were trained back then, to become expert navigators of the landscape, so that way we could go on regardless of not knowing exactly where we were, but having bearings and landmarks with us at all times. So that was fine. So I'm heading down and the wind picks up a bit with some snow. Every so often it's like my vision goes for a second because of the snow picking up. I start to think I've got to be really careful if there is a bear out here. I actually have a rifle on my shoulder, but the thing is I hadn't really shot one for a while. I wasn't so sure I knew exactly how to use it safely, and I wasn't sure it was a high enough caliber to take out a bear. I remembered one of my other colleagues telling me that if you get into a bear situation, just shoot it between the eyes. That's okay, but what if you miss, I thought. We had the bolt action one, so that's at least a second gone there in between rounds. Then, oh no, I haven't loaded it. I quickly put a few rounds in and put the safety off. This is probably the dumbest thing I did, because I had a loaded rifle which would occasionally point towards my head, but I didn't realise this until after the fact. So I'm walking round, and every so often I can hear a weeping kind of moan. I don't know what it is. It's definitely spooky though. I thought maybe there was an injured person around. I go to call out to ask if they want help, but I don't get a reply. I go to do it again, and furthermore there's no reply. So I'm just thinking to myself, well, I don't know what's happening now. I want to call out, but I can't for some reason. It kind of feels like I'm being stalked or hunted. Yes, that's it. The feeling of being hunted now. Gosh, it's well and truly not a nice feeling to have. This goes on for a little bit longer, and I'm now walking into somewhat deeper snow. I slip down a bit, but quickly steady myself, and I think I see something moving. There's some movement in the tree line, but I can't make out exactly what it is. Then I hear it. This time it kind of sounds like thunder or something, but there's no thunder above. Odd. It's kind of like if you've ever watched one of those really old horror films, and every so often they have the thunder and lightning and whatnot, and you're thinking, oh yeah, something bad's about to happen. But that was creepy. You know what, I'm gonna say it, that was the scariest moment of my life. Constantly hearing thunder of which I could not explain whatsoever. It was almost like there should have been something, but there just wasn't. And it kept happening every so often, almost like a monster was about to jump out and get me. It didn't happen, so I press on. I'm going a bit further along now. And every so often parallel to me, I can see snow being disturbed on some of the trees, but I can never see what's the source of this. My presumptions, of which I believe are correct potentially, are that it's a fox or some kind of animal like that. I don't know, just something. But I guess I tell myself that at the time just to try and make sense of this. But I don't know what these are. So I keep going. Then I see it. A very faint pinkish colour in the snow. It's going off of the area that I'm in, so I now make a diversion in order to follow it. I watch this for a little while, and it doesn't seem to be picking up much. Every so often it seems to be a bit more strong, but I now notice a strange yellowish colour in the snow too. So yeah, I keep going and just following this, and I realise that every so often there's a splotch of blood. Okay, that's not very good. I know something's definitely up now. I know I'm definitely getting close. The problem is, in this situation, I don't know for sure whether I'm actually hunting something, or whether I'm actually finding a person. The problem is, in this kind of state of fear, you can be very likely to take shots or do things that you wouldn't in other circumstances. So I'm definitely a bit more anxious now than I probably should be. I'm just worried that I'm going to be trigger happy. I'm going to say it now, I'm probably the most trigger happy person in the world. Even if things made me jump while we're practicing on the gun range, I would always take a shot, almost an instinct. I decided to put the safety on now, and I take a round out or two. I'm just worried that I'm just going to empty this clip and either run out of ammo or shoot a poor person who might already be injured. I've seen a car crash once, so I should be prepared for what I see, right? Well, I keep going. There was something extremely unsettling about following a blood trail like this. It almost feels like there's a picture being painted in front of you. You're basically following the breadcrumbs of some kind of monster. At least that's how I felt. I didn't notice it again until afterwards, but there's no footsteps to go with this blood. There just seems to be blood going further and further into the woods. It doesn't pick up enough though, and I'm still following it, and I've got to admit, I'm getting a bit annoyed now. I feel like, when is this thing going to show itself? Who's there? And I stop, and I can see that I'm in a cavern. I call out, "Hey," hearing my voice echoing off of the surrounding environment. I stop and call out, "Hey," once again. I'm trying my best to figure out if anybody's here. I say, "Hey, I know you're hurt, but I can help you. I've come here with supplies, food, everything. Just let me know you're here. I can help you." I don't hear anything, so I stop for a moment. Places like this are always quiet, but it felt awfully so now. It's strange, I oddly felt quite relaxed, almost like I was in some kind of dream. I think because I had the rifle I wasn't too worried at this point, but it was definitely odd, and now the blood trail has stopped. I haven't really got a choice though, other than just to keep checking in the area. I do know roughly where I am, but the further I go, the more loose this knowledge becomes. The thing is, literally everything looks the same here, especially in the snow, so that's not helping now. There's no footprints around now other than my own, so I know I'm definitely not where I should be, but at least with the knowledge that I'm starting from zero, I know that I can keep going and hopefully get somewhere half decent in terms of progress, so that's what I'm doing. I get further and then decide that I'm going to give up. I've come quite far now. I've searched the area that I really need to, and there's no more blood. So I head back. "Why have you done that?" a voice in my head says. "You shouldn't have given up on somebody like that." And I start to have strange visions. I have the vision of somebody bleeding. I can see them wandering around aimlessly and just covered in blood. I think that's odd. I still can't make sense of this. It seems like they're being hunted too, which is especially weird. They're going further and further. Then I snap out of it again. I think I should really get back now. I'm somebody with a relatively over-imaginative thinking pattern at the best of times, but this was a bit creepy to me. I'm going further and further now, and eventually I get back to maybe the halfway point. I'm battling two different voices in my head now. One's telling me that you're a coward, you need to stop and go back, but the other one's telling me just go, get out of here. I then notice that there's some more blood. This time it seems much stronger, and I'm a bit concerned now. I can see the blood going up into the hill a bit further from where I am, and some blood on the trees. This is definitely from a person. I'm getting creeped out now. I grab my hand and try and will myself forward, almost imagining that there's another person there with me. So I start to progress onwards. Now crash. I hear the sound as though somebody's fallen, and I drop to one knee with my rifle in hand. I scream out, "Hey," and again I'm met with more reverberations of my voice coming back to me, the only solace I have in this moment. Now I move along, and with my hands shaking, trying to see where this all leads to. I now have some kind of flash again. My vision goes for a second, but now I can see dogs, or more like wolves, looking very angry up ahead of me. For a second I think they're real, and I realise that I'm aiming at them, but then I flash back to normal and there's nothing there. But it follows the blood. It's like my mind's trying to tell me something. Wolves. There must be wolves out here. So I start going further, and I can hear wolves. Oh no, I think I must be in a bad area now. But I press on furthermore. The blood seems pretty bad. I know that I'm about to find a dead body. I get a chill up my spine as I realise this. The wind's picked up now, and it's kind of making a bit of a haunting sound. For reasons unknown to me, my legs feel extremely heavy at this point, and I really have to force myself up. I actually start using my hands on my knees to help me go further. I look at the blood on one of the trees and it looks fresh, and you can see the distinctive marks of somebody's forefingers. Oh god. I call out, hey, hey, somewhat getting angry this time. I force myself to go forward, really starting to feel sick now, and I have to keep swallowing to try and stop myself from vomiting. And now another flashback, and this one's so much more powerful than all the rest. I see it. Somebody being torn apart by dogs. I realise now they're wolves. Really going at them. This is a lot of blood now, and it makes me feel sick. I go back to normal and I'm frozen. I'm just coming up to the top now, and I'm scared to look down. I kind of fall at this point. I think it was almost like I kind of stepped forward, trying to get a foot in, but not realising that the snow was quite soft and the ground was a bit further below it than I expected, and I start rolling down, tumbling now. I scream out, swearing, looking for my rifle. I punch the ground, then get up and quickly grab my gun again. I sweep it round and say, hey, hey, as I realise that there's more blood to my right. I turn around and that's when I see it. A body. A decomposing body in the snow. Though there's no blood around it this time. I think that's really weird. I think maybe more snow settled, so I walk towards it. I don't know why I was aiming my gun at it. I think it just made me feel a bit more safe. I kick the snow, but I can't get too close to it. I'm expecting to see some blood. Maybe there's a layer of snow covering it, but there's not at all. I do this for a while and do it in a semicircle, but no snow that reveals blood's underneath. Really strange. Now, I close my eyes for a second and I hear a terrifying scream, as well as some kind of howling sound. I turn around expecting to have to shoot some of these things, but there's nothing there. Then I realise that I can hear some kind of animal nearby. I don't know what animal it is, but just some kind of thunderous growling sound, which is not too loud but detectable, like it wants me to know it's there. So I start going backwards. I'm absolutely fixated on this person that once was. It really felt horrible seeing this here. I just couldn't look away from it, and it's the only time in my life that I've ever had this before. It's like I was so fixated on this person's injury that they must have had that I forget everything else. Before I know it, I'm falling backwards again. I slap my hands down, but it's too late. I start tumbling backwards again. I come to a stop and my rifle hits the back of my head. I curse now and grab the rifle. I go to load another round in, ready to be fully loaded now, but it jams. I say, no, come on. I hit it on the ground and it makes a light thud. It's still jammed. I say, come on, you've got to be kidding with me. But alas, I'm wrong. So I just get up and start walking. I'm doing a slow kind of military walk, half squatted down. I don't want to be seen. I keep scanning my horizon, but I can't see anything. I'm walking slowly backwards. I also notice that there's no more blood at this time. I put it down to maybe the snow, but I think that's quite weird. I should have seen some more by now. I keep turning back. I can hear the growling sound once more. I decide that I need to pick up the pace a bit now, especially because I'm getting cold from being on the floor, so I start to pick up a light jog. I'm not really aiming the gun now, it was making my arms hurt holding it that way, so I'm just kind of holding it like I'm in water. But then I can hear something, much closer this time, another snarling growl. It's starting to get dark now and I do start to panic. I let off a shot in fear. It was probably lucky that I still had the gun higher than I expected, because I probably could have just killed someone then. I now realise that the rifle's actually unjammed itself and I'm really happy. I quickly put another round in and I'm ready to fight now. I think the bravery took over for maybe 1 second, but then I can hear more growling. I start to pick up the pace more. It must be those wolves. They've got to be hunting me now. I never had a situation like this before. I can let off my warning shots, but I don't know what to do other than this. I wasn't really trained for this. The thing is, there's one of me, and these are pack animals. So what if they want me? That'll be it. They'll just kill me. And then there's no more John going around anymore. I start to tear up at the thought of this. The thought of people knowing what happened to me. I guess I can go up in a tree, but how long can I stay up there for? It's going to be really hard to climb up these trees. I don't think I have the strength for it, to be honest. So I keep going now. I decide all I can do is just let off a few shots, and that's what I keep doing. I'm down to 4 rounds now, and I know I can't do this the whole way. I think I'm going to get down to my last 2, because at least then I can probably maybe kill a couple of these things. Now I hear a wolf howl. I haven't heard this before and it really scares me. It sounded so close. I quickly look round in all directions trying to find this thing, but I can't find anything. I punch down now in anger. I slowed the pace a bit. The pace I had would have been impossible to keep up with in the thick snow like this where I was now. But I keep going. Whenever I heard that they were getting close, I would let off a round. I've only got a few more left now. I have to conserve the ammunition. I don't understand why they couldn't give us more ammo. I mean, I know I'd let off a lot of rounds, but come on, we're out here alone. I start going further when I now see one finally. There is a wolf not far away. I've never seen one this close before, and this thing was absolutely massive. It was a greyish colour and it looked really horrifying. I can see some more around but not very clearly, but this one, it was terrifying. I aim just above the tree where it is and pang, I put a hole in the tree. This thing sprints off now, but I can't see the direction it's gone, so I quickly reload and start picking up the pace more. I know that there's definitely more than 3, but I've only got 2 bullets now. It's getting more and more dark, and I know my night vision's not going to be near as good as theirs, but I have to keep going. So I press on now. It's all falls silent for a little while. I hope that somebody heard my shots being ringed off, but again, we don't have the radios now, so it might not have been much use. The problem is too, it's going to be really hard to find where they come from. I just hope that somebody heard it and can come and help me. I now make it back onto the path. I crash through it, leaving it open, and I start walking. Every time that I hear my feet on that wooden board, it made me feel more and more comfortable and confident. I know that I'm not that far away now. I put the safety on finally and shoulder that thing and keep going. I've probably gone for about 30 minutes straight now. I can't hear any more animals and I see some of the others. They look very panicked and rush over to me asking what's wrong. I just stand there for a moment and say, "Wolves, wolves, there's wolves out there," and they look concerned. One of the other guys goes out to get more guns, and Now I have to show them where I found it, that body. I say there's somebody there, they're pretty beat up. They ask how bad is it, and I say, well, I don't think they're gonna make it. Now time is of the essence. I felt a lot better now having all four of us there together. They called our squad the Hunter Squad, which was kind of cool I guess, but I kind of felt like we were the pack animals now and not them, so we head out there. So we start going towards the very end of where that thing was, opening the gate again. That was some really weird thing that I've never been able to explain since actually. The gate had managed to close. I run through that, leaving it open basically, crashing, but it was closed. Strange, maybe it was just my momentum made it swing back, but I didn't hear anything. But I don't know, I could have been scared and not heard it. So now we go ahead. We're all pointing in different directions, and there's one of us going a bit slower checking our six. This is really important. I don't have more than the 2 bullets with me now, but that's fine, we have quite a few. We've all got these rifles. They're not semi-autos, but they're pretty powerful, I guess. So we start going and I say, but there was blood here. There was literally blood here. I don't understand. But we keep on going. And I can't figure out where we're supposed to be. We now stop because we can hear growling and we get down into a formation. That's when I hear the first shot. I turn around to look where it's come from and there's another. I can then see my colleague shooting away. Bang, bang, bang. 5 shots are let off in total and then there's silence. I look up and I can see some animals slouched over. There's at least 3 of their bodies and they look huge. I go over there but my colleague stops me saying, "You're crazy, you're gonna get yourself killed, John." I say, "Yeah, you're right." And I start slowly turning back. We move up now and we keep going. I finally recognise where I was because of my own footsteps, but again, there's no blood, which is strange. I see, yeah, it's right there over the hill, and we make a formation up there. The team leader then goes down to investigate Mark. He's quite brave, I've got to give it to him. He used to be in the military, so he's not really fazed by much of anything. So he goes down. He gets further and further until he puts his hand up, signaling him for us to stop. At least that's what I think he's doing. It might be in a military thing, I don't know. He then goes over to where the body is, and he says, yeah, he's long gone. He puts his hand up, gesturing for us to come closer. We can now see that this person's probably been dead there for quite a long time. We decide that we're going to recover it the next day. It's too dangerous for us to be out there. I mean, it was good, don't get me wrong. We investigated. We thought it was somebody potentially still with life to live, but for this person, sadly, it wasn't the case. My God, that's horrible what they do to them, I thought to myself. As we turn back around and start making our way back. We then get back to almost exactly the same spot where that we've been shooting them things, but we can't see any, which is really strange. We think maybe they've limped off or something, but my colleagues are certain that they put enough into them that they shouldn't have made it. It's really bizarre. We all look at each other confused, but decide to press on. We're still holding that formation, just not as tight. Because of getting a few of them and the sounds of our rifles, they've definitely fled now. We eventually get back in, and I get sent back home again. It turns out that they could never recover the bodies of those wolves. It's really strange. The other thing that doesn't make sense is I definitely saw some blood, but that body had been there for quite a while. So I just don't understand what could have happened in that case. It was really one of the most horrible things that I ever experienced or witnessed in my life, and I'm glad that I've never seen anything like it since. I work as a fire watch out in my native country. I'd done this for a large time in my life. I'd spent some time in the military too, well, about 2 years or so, but I always enjoyed my time out in the nature the most. Now, the area that I covered was very pretty. I'm actually from the area that doesn't have lots of hills and stuff, so being out in where the hills are and the mountains was something really beautiful. I remembered that I absolutely loved this place, but one day my perspective on it really changed. Now let me explain. The land of mine actually has lots of history. My grandfather had worked out here before, and apparently he said that there was lots of weird things that would happen. Apparently they'd report some kind of mysterious figure in white. It looked like a beautiful young girl with very long flowing hair, but apparently she would float through the woods, seemingly without interacting with anything, bouncing from side to side before disappearing, making eye contact with men. He told me that they never figured out exactly why she was out there, just that it had really scared them. Apparently somebody was actually murdered here long ago, and allegedly that was her spirit haunting here. Apparently she was looking for her missing partner or something, and that's what they thought was happening, that she was here roaming around trying to haunt them. Now, I kind of believed it, and a lot of people in my family also did. When I was a kid, I was absolutely horrified about being out here. The problem was, when I was young too, I was bigger, so I didn't have much stamina. I would find myself getting out of breath just going up the trails and things and doing the hike to the different areas we would go. So I always thought that I was especially vulnerable if anything were to happen, and that made me really scared. I was convinced that one day something was going to try and get me. So, doing my work, I would often spend lots of time out there by myself or with a small team. The most important thing that we could do is just survey everywhere and make sure that there were no fires. I had a couple of big fires though that we had to deal with. Where I live, you also had to help put out the fire if you could. It was something we'd also do to help out the fire department when they got here. We had pretty limited resources, so it was really important that we would help out and try and make a difference. I was never too worried by these fires though. There was very scarce and sparse population here, so it was pretty easy to notify people in the surrounding areas. Usually the fires would just burn themselves out. I do remember one strange thing though. I remember once during one of the fires I was helping with, I could have sworn that I'd seen a figure in the fire. It was just standing there and kind of staring at us. I only saw it for about a second or two before it eventually gone back into the flames, but it sounded just like what my grandfather had described. We knew for a fact there weren't any people here, so we weren't too worried, but we did have a quick search around. Maybe somebody got lost out there. But this thing was floating. I never really put two and two together, so I can't be certain that I actually saw the same thing as my grandfather had, but my grandfather was convinced that I had from the way I described it. I was a little put off by the whole experience, to be honest, but let me get to my main story. Now, working out here one day, I remembered that my colleagues had reported a huge fireball. They basically reported to me what could only sound like a UFO, which had crashed off somewhere, and now it was up to us to go and investigate and figure it out. The good news for me is that there wasn't any fire out here, not that we could see anyway. This happened around nightfall. They basically said it kind of looked like a meteor or something, and they were very scared about going up there. I myself wasn't too scared about it for some reason. I just thought, I'm going to have a good hike through here, then eventually find it, and it will be something cool. Maybe something I could even take home, like a cool rock off the side of it or something. So I start my hiking, and it starts raining immediately, which again is a good sign, because if there is a fire, then we haven't got to worry too much. The rain was really going to help put it out. I remember when we started, I didn't bother looking about how far I had to go because it was quite some distance. I was on foot and had my radio, and eventually broke off from the other guys I was working with. I continue hiking and realise that I'm getting very out of breath. It was weird, it reminded me of when I was much younger and more unfit, but it was almost like any time I did an incline, I would really feel it. I wasn't even carrying that much weight on me too, and I thought I was pretty good and healthy at the time, but I guess not. It was kind of a wake-up call for me more than anything else though, because if there was actually danger, then I wouldn't have been one of the best people to help you, and I didn't like that. That didn't sit well with me. I needed to do as much as possible to help people, and I felt like I was letting down my community. Now while hiking, every so often I can hear some faint cries. It was pretty creepy. It kind of sounded like an alien voice, to be honest, and I thought that was really weird. I wasn't really convinced there was an alien, but it was definitely a weird animal. Now some of my colleagues actually reported this on the radios too, so I knew I wasn't the only one hearing it. I then go further and further, and I can actually see some of the trees have been scraped to the top, where obviously something crashed here, but I couldn't see anything. The cries stopped after a little bit, and I couldn't seem to locate them. I just knew it was definitely scaring me, because now it was getting to nightfall. There was some weird sound, and I wasn't sure what direction I was going in. It was kind of like the sound of something ticking over, like a constant click. It kind of sounded like an engine, but a little bit different. I also felt very uncomfortable now. The rain was giving me some kind of reassurance so weirdly. I don't know, it felt like everything else was eerily quiet, so having the sounds of nature, at least in some form, was definitely something I like to have. In this area, you can actually see pretty good through the woods. The trees were tall, but they weren't very thick. Also, the plants on either side of me only come up to about my knee height, so visibility wasn't too bad. It did mean that every so often I'd have to climb off a tree a bit to scan areas, but that was fine. I was still following the direction of the trees which were damaged, until eventually, I see something really creepy. Just up ahead, I see what I can only describe as some kind of demon. It looked like a tall figure, covered in some kind of black material, slowly lurching around. I ducked down for a second and slowly lift my head up. I hear one more faint cry, and I can't figure out where it's coming from. I radio in my language that I've seen something very weird, and my colleagues respond and say that they're coming over. I was actually so scared that I stayed crouched down for another 10 minutes, and then I feel a hand touch my back. I feel like my heart stops and I have no pulse, as within a flash I turn around and it's my colleague. I swear at them and ask them, why did they make me jump like that? And they said they thought I was hurt. Did I truly look that scared? Maybe I did. I was getting paranoid now, but I decide to get up and we go towards where I heard the thing, but I don't see anything. We decide the best thing to do is to split up, and I continue going to where the UFO crash site is. I keep walking and lurching through the forest until eventually I see something smouldering off in the distance. All I can see is smoke at this point, and I think maybe there is a fire. I really don't know what to expect now. I really think that I'm about to be met by some kind of tall green or grey men. God knows what I've just seen. I have my Bible in my pocket and I'm clutching it very strong as I get closer and closer and start to pray. I seem to become stuck in quicksand though, and I just can't bring myself to move more forward. I had a strange sense of dread that I haven't had before, but eventually I managed to force myself to put one foot in front of the other and make my way over the horizon. Then I see it. Some kind of mangled up thing, covered by trees. It's kind of white and blue in colour, which I didn't expect, covered in some kind of black silk. It then becomes more apparent what I'm looking at. This isn't a UFO at all. This is a plane crash. Within a second, I realise what's happened, and I quickly scream onto the radio that we've had a downed aircraft here. What was it, a UFO? I say, no, it's one of ours. It's a small aircraft. I can see that this thing has come down and obviously set on fire. Then one of my colleagues screams, we found him. I ask what, but don't get a reply. I just sprint back to their direction. By the time that I've gotten over there, I can see my colleagues surrounding a person. They're covered in jet fuel and something else, and clearly it was a pilot with half of their hair burnt off their body. They absolutely look like an alien, and I suddenly feel very faint. I actually ended up passing out now, and I can't remember much else. I just know that about 20 minutes later I woke up again, and I seemed to have a dream. I had a really long dream, which is weird because I knew I was only asleep for 20 minutes or so. When my colleagues are pouring water on my head and waking me up. There's an emergency worker then too, who's a medic checking over me. He says, "Are you okay?" And I say, yeah, I'm fine. And I have some sugary drinks, which one of my colleagues gave me, and some snacks, and I feel much better, though I'm covered in a cold sweat. I eventually get up, and we start walking back, and there's more police coming. Eventually we all make it back, and I get to go home early because of medical reasons. Now I never actually know what come of that pilot or the plane wreckage. I just know I can't believe how scary and inhuman he looked when we found him. Poor guy, I really hope that he's okay. It was easily the most scary experience in my entire life, one that I'm never gonna forget. One of the weirdest stories that I've ever heard happened is not my own, but my father's. My father works as a forest service worker, and he had many weird encounters over his years. This one in particular gave me chills all throughout my childhood, and it made me constantly just question things. Now, I'll tell this exactly how my father's told me and how that he's wrote it down for me, so sit back and enjoy. I think it's truly bizarre. Now, to start out, everything's going pretty well in life. I'm happy and my wife is now pregnant. Now this is going to be our second child. We already had our other one who's about 1 now, and we're really excited to have a second. We had a boy and we were hoping for another girl. It turned out that we had another boy, but that was just as much joy into our lives. Those who haven't experienced parenthood don't understand how it changes your life sometimes, and how it changes your approach to taking risks. I know that I certainly had the same feeling too. Now, where I was based at for my job, I didn't really encounter anything too heavy. I hadn't been working this role for that many years, and there was other more experienced guys out there. In fact, a lot of the time I'd actually get quite frustrated because I really truly wanted to do more, but I just wasn't able to. Sometimes there would be things that the other guys would know that I could do, and they would just rush off to do it before I had the chance to, and it was so frustrating. I enjoyed being out there, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of stuck doing more computer stuff and just, I guess, the boring things. Now, at this place I knew that I could progress, but it was going to take years. They basically offered me all the training and everything, but my god, it was slow. The thing was, I was probably smarter than all of the people there, just not being given any opportunities that I needed to progress. It was almost like they'd given me this form, and it said everything I needed to do, but there were holes in it that they couldn't see, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I was quite tempted to join the Navy. I actually wanted to become a Navy SEAL at the time. It wasn't really possible because of some of the injuries I had, but I know that if I really pushed myself, I probably could have overcome them. But the problem was, even sometimes when I was doing this job, even just hiking around and doing my normal things, I would have a pain that I couldn't seem to stop from the bottom of my foot. I actually still have issues with it today. Not quite sure why it started, but yeah, it's just something I get on with. So on this particular day, it was just the same. There was more exciting call-outs and things to go and do, but literally before I could even get to the radio to say I would do it, someone would say I'm on it and would already be up there with their coffee in their hand, taking the last sips of their coffee before flying on out the door and to go and have all the fun. Yeah, it kind of really sucked doing this, but I guess it gave me more time to think and just relax a bit. The problem is, if you're like me, that time very quickly lends to boredom. I started going through some of the records and some of the reports. I basically had to reorganize them because some people in this office area, they would just throw everything onto a desk and not do anything. They would only look for items if they needed it, which of course is a very stupid idea and wastes everyone's time, but back in my day I guess that's how it was. So I start reading through some reports. There was a few pretty creepy things on there. Some people would say that they had a feeling, like an intense feeling of fear that they couldn't describe, accompanied by a knocking on some of the trees. They were never able to locate the source of this sound and they thought it was just animals, but it came up quite often over the years. Then I heard a really strange one. Apparently there was a ranger that worked here and a lot of the other people thought that he was going crazy. I was reading a second-hand account of what had happened to him. Apparently, something had spoke to him and told him the future. Weirdly though, when I looked back through another account, which was more recent than that one, some of the things that he said actually come true. And the person making the report actually noted that and how weird it was. Upon further investigation, it turned out that this person thought that he had spoke to beings or something. I don't know, kind of like aliens? They didn't describe it very well, just very vaguely. Now it seems like many of these cases were dismissed. There were other weird things too, like a Pacific area where you'd feel very hot. Completely unnaturally, to the point that you'd actually question if there was some kind of hot spring there. Or something weird that shouldn't have been there, but again they could never find the source of it. The thing that made this even more bizarre is that eventually the plants and trees and everything in the area would start to die, so you basically knew for certain that something was definitely off there. Now I decided that I had to get out and do the very minimum just to not be in the office, and that's what I did. I remembered setting out and I was being a little bit more paranoid than normal. I think all these stories were just playing in my head. I remembered I kept thinking that I saw something walking through the tree line above ahead of me, always maintaining the higher ground. It kind of just trailed alongside me. It's really hard to describe, but was truly creepy. Now I don't know what it was, but I think it was some kind of large animal there. Not big enough to be a bear, but certainly weird. I did think maybe it was a hiker out there, but it wasn't possible. I thought that was bizarre. I remember thinking to myself that you've just learnt the power of human potential in the mind, and it was pretty scary to me. Now, life goes on. We probably get to about a month or 6 weeks in, and again, they're just not training me properly. It's kind of really annoying because they'll complain at me for doing something when it's exactly how somebody's told me to do it. And they'll say, oh no, just do it confidently. But then, they'll say, why did you do that? And you'll explain that's how you're trained, and they wouldn't seem to listen, and it was kind of like a hostile group. I didn't end up staying there for too long, but I'll get to that later. So what do? Once again, get reserved to balancing the books and just doing the normal work. Now this is actually at a time before we had computers, so it did make days very boring too. The problem I found is that some people just did not have good handwriting. I've never been the best at reading others' handwriting, but especially in these situations, my god, it was like some of these people had honestly made an effort to write as illegible as possible. And again, if you can't read it, they complain, so I kind of become an expert of reading these things eventually. And again, every so often there's weird reports. I realise too, quite often when it's recorded, people just think, oh, it's the other guy not paying attention. Maybe he wants everyone to look at him and stuff like that. At least that's on the report conclusion, but I had a feeling that something was off when I kept on seeing the reportings of some kind of beings out there. This spanned over a number of years too, and long before I was there. They all seemed to be described as relatively the same. They called them the forest walkers. Apparently they seemed to be quite tall, and they would walk in almost a weird limp motion. The weird thing is that they would be silent too, and if you approached them, weird things would happen. Some people said they felt almost like they were high. Others said that they would just know things they couldn't have otherwise and stuff like that. I don't know if I believe in the supernatural that much, or at least at the time I didn't, but I just considered that these were just things that happen when you've been out in the woods for too long by yourself. Now eventually as time increased, and I started complaining to the higher ups about the issues I was having, I started to get out more and do more interesting things. I even got to rescue a few people too, which is a really cool feeling. I don't know if you've ever experienced it before, but there's something so cool about knowing that you preserved human life. You stepped in and you made a big difference and impact for someone. It's not something I'd felt before in other jobs too, so I was quite happy. Now, as I go out for a patrol one evening, I remembered having a strange feeling that the air was different. There was almost some kind of metallic smell that I couldn't quite describe. I was concerned that I had some kind of illness or that I accidentally got something on my nose, but no matter how much I wipe my nose, I can't seem to get rid of the feeling. And there was almost some kind of static in the air. You know, like when you have static electric and just before you feel the buzz, it was kind of like that. Now that's when I feel something. I can tell something's looking at me and I stop to turn around and see what it is. And then I can make out some kind of figure. It's probably about 20 feet away. It's wearing kind of like a dark coloured robe, but when it gets closer it appears more white. It walks with a weird limp and I can't believe my eyes. I actually rub my eyes quickly, not sure for a second if I'm dreaming, and it's gone. Now I think this is pretty creepy. I want to figure out what this is, so filled with excitement I actually jogged towards where it was. Now I couldn't tell you too much else about it, but just that it completely vanished. I probably spent another hour myself actually searching the surrounding areas, just to see if I could find anything there to explain what I'd just seen, but alas, I come up blank. There's nothing there but myself. Now I'm actually a little bit irritated because I don't want to seem stupid. I really don't want to become like one of the people whose stories I've read, probably to be dismissed later on the same way that I dismissed some of theirs. But currently, it seems like I'm going to have no option but for that to be the case for myself. Yeah, it sucked really. I go back eventually and tell them what happened. Now, no one believes me, which is what I expected, and they say, yeah, you're too junior to be going out there and investigating things like this. I was pretty fed up again. I come from a role before where I was very well respected, and honestly, the way I was being treated was really annoying me. Now, a few months go on, and it becomes winter, and the going gets a little bit more tough really. It was pretty cold out there. I mean, uncomfortably so for myself. Now, I remembered on one particular day, I can't tell you specifically what I was doing, I just remembered that I was out there, that I spotted something weird, I mean really bizarre. There were these small figures, kind of limping around in the woods, again silently. Now I can't believe what I'm seeing. They're probably about 5 feet tall now, and in more of a white coloured gown kind of thing. Like I said, I didn't know what this was. I thought maybe it was something from Halloween, like decorations people put out there. And I actually wasn't too scared now. I was convinced that this wasn't actually a real thing or threat or danger, so I decided to sit back and very slowly follow these things. Now I didn't look behind myself, so there could have been more, but these things just kept on marching on, kind of down the path for a good 10 minutes longer. Now they never once seemed to notice me or so much as turn around, so again, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm seeing, but I think it's some kind of Halloween decoration that someone's playing around with. I don't know, it could be a cult, it could be anything, but I'm not too worried. I don't know if it was the size of them or what, but I just wasn't concerned. Also, there seemed to be nature interacting normally around, so that meant that these things weren't a threat, at least I thought. So this continues on until eventually they all stop at something. I stop too, and I can see about 4 of them. I was incredibly curious as to what they were looking at, but there's no real way for me to be able to see where I'm based currently. I get closer and closer and realize that I'm going to have to take the long way round now to figure out what it is. I decide to take a stealthy approach, and I try and walk very slowly through the foliage and get around. I do make it to a pretty good horizon, and I can see in front, and I still can't figure out what they're looking at. Now I'm sure these are people now, so I become a little bit more confident, and I walk down even closer to where they are. Eventually, I ended up crashing through some of the brush, and I decide that I'm going to be more present now. Obviously these people know that I'm here, so what's the point of trying to hide away from them? I go a little bit quicker now, and eventually go round to where I think that they're facing, and I can't see their actual faces. It's kind of just dark where that their faces are completely covered up in something. Now, I crouch down to get a better look at them, and suddenly, I can hear voices in my head. They don't sound like voices I ever heard before too, and it's almost like my own voice but different. And I keep hearing different things that haven't happened yet. I hear about the birth of my son and know that it's going to be a boy. I know exactly what he's going to look like, how my career's going to go, what my wife's going to do, and some of the hardships that come up and who's going to pass away in my family. It actually makes me incredibly emotional at this point, and I almost feel like it's too much and start to cry a bit. I ended up kind of just becoming overwhelmed with my emotions, and I fall back into the dirt and stare up at the sky. The sky's very bright today, and it actually looks quite nice. After a moment, I kind of stop hearing the voices so much. They kind of just slowly fade out, like somebody slowly turning down the volume on a record, and I get up. I realise now that whatever these things are has gone now, and I'm just here alone, very confused as to what's actually just happened to me. I get up, and I'm sure there's going to be an explanation for this. I ended up scouring around for probably another hour and a half, until I conclude that nothing's here. That's when my panic finally catches up with me, and I decide that I need to get back as quick as possible. I start making my way there. I eventually get back to the station and immediately write down my report. I didn't speak to anybody else about what had happened, and that's when I'm confused. I suddenly realised that what I was reading was very similar to some of the reports of what had happened years before. The ones where that people had considered the guys that were reporting it a little bit crazy or seeing things. And for that reason, I actually took the report and ended up throwing it into the trash. I didn't want my colleagues to think I was crazy. I mean, I didn't like most of them to begin with. I knew that this was going to hurt me moving on to the other areas that I wanted to work, so there was going to be no benefit of me actually posting this. I ended up moving on and working as a ranger in different areas and doing different kinds of roles too, even being a fire service worker. Now here's the weird thing. I only realised it much later, but I did have a son, and he looked exactly like I knew he would. The job that I changed into is exactly what I heard I would. My wife's role too. Also, some family members that died, they were the exact people who I was told would do so as well. Now suddenly I felt kind of a weird fear come over me, almost like a wash and flood of emotions coming back, realising that something had contacted me back then, and for whatever reason wanted me to know what was going to happen. I can't put my finger on why this happened or how it happened to me. I just know what I saw was real, and that I wasn't the only person that saw those kinds of things out there. Lots of my other colleagues had experienced some very similar things, and I just don't know what to make of it all. This is something that haunts me, and it doesn't seem to stop. So, I started out working as a Forest Service ranger about 10 years ago. I did this for quite a while, to be honest, and it was something that really had a lot of perks for me. I had a bit of a dysfunctional family, so it really helped me get away from them and just everything that I didn't like in the world. So, for a long time, it was perfect. Now, even when I wasn't on duty, I'd actually go through the same woods sometimes, especially if it was a rainstorm or something, with my umbrella just to relax and unwind. I kind of come at one with that place, and I didn't feel whole without it. A few others that actually worked that job found the same thing. Every so often we bump into each other on days where we do our walks like this, and it was really pleasant. I remembered I absolutely loved the sound of the rain falling onto my umbrella, and especially during the storms. I was never too worried about being out there, especially during the time that it was nearer to October or the winter, and you would have beautiful orange coloured leaves everywhere on the floor, and lots of tall trees without too many leaves, so you could see for miles and miles. I remembered walking here, and I had a really beautiful lake up on the left of me, which was really gorgeous. You weren't allowed to go fishing here too, and people very rarely would actually go on there with boats and things, so I didn't have too much of a problem with being there. I knew I wouldn't bump into anyone. So while embarking on one of these exact walks, I did notice something strange. There seemed to be flyers everywhere. It was almost like people had pinned loads to trees. I thought this was odd, and it definitely wasn't something people were supposed to do, so I went up there to investigate. I tried to pull one down, but I just can't seem to for some reason. I actually got a small cut on my hand while trying to take it off, and I was like, wow, this is weird. I took a moment to look what it said, but there was nothing on it. It was just completely plain. That was weird. I thought maybe they were taking the trees down and they just have to mark them. It's not always that easy to see if they've spray painted on one, because obviously you have to check all sides of it, so I thought maybe this was a new invention. So I go past some more trees and eventually they stop, and it made me feel a lot better. It was really weird, but I think while at least they'd making some kind of effort to try and improve this place. There was actually some rumours that they were going to make a cafe or something, which is on the waterfront, which would be a good idea. But I thought this place is terrible for it. I mean, you're miles away from everyone, you're going to have no customers except us, but hey, I guess they do what they want. So I continue on my walk, and that's when I hear what sounds like an off-key piano. It sounded like just a single note, but I couldn't figure out what key it was trying to play specifically. It was quite creepy. I'd only ever seen this in horror movies before, and I really thought somebody was playing it off of some kind of device. I had a look around everywhere, but I couldn't see anything. The lake was very peaceful, and I guess that helped put me at ease seeing the nice still water with the raindrops splashing every so often. It starts to rain really heavily now. I kind of want to go investigate this, but I feel like it's not such a good idea in this weather. I mean, everything's covered in rain and water as it is, so I don't want to make myself too muddy. I decide to keep going though, and continue as if nothing was off. I start to think maybe I heard it in my head. I think, yeah, that was probably what it is. Of course it's not just a random piano here, but I wouldn't have been surprised if I'd seen one. So I just continue on. I get up to another part of the lake, which again is really beautiful. It's almost like a natural causeway of which passes through it with trees on either side. God, this place is so cool. The rain's falling so hard that it actually kicks up the smell of the muddy puddles, which is something I really don't like. So I quickly go past this, and I notice a few more things attached to trees. But I think, well, they're probably just doing a good clear out or something. I don't know. There's a lot of money in these trees probably, so maybe that's what they're doing. But I thought this place was protected. It doesn't matter so much. And I continue, and I take a moment just to take in the scenery around me. I'm basically just stopped now, on the dead centre of this path, with water on either side of me. I think this place is pretty awesome. And that's when I hear another key again. Just exactly like before, but in a slightly lower down tone. I don't know pianos well or how to describe this, but it's almost like you played a key, then you push your hand down to the left to try and replicate it again. So it sounds almost the same, but a little bit different. Again, I have no idea where this come from, and I decided just to make a move along now. I was actually getting a little bit worried about my sanity, but I've had no issues with anything like this before, nor does anybody in my family. We're not schizophrenic, so we're not hearing things, so I don't know what it could be. I'm now completely convinced that somebody out here is playing music to me and I just can't figure out where. It's pretty weird though. I don't see anyone whatsoever. I decided that I should just leave this area, basically for my own safety. I mean, if there is someone here that's weirdly out in the rain, I really don't want to encounter them. And I don't want to get wet or have to run or something. Not that it'd make much of a difference. I keep going now, and I'm following more along the path, but I keep seeing more markings on the trees as I go. It really seems like they've been placed here on purpose for me to see. It's like everywhere I go I seem to find more of it. But I guess that was an issue for another time maybe. I get closer to the water now and stop for a while. I really find a calming effect from being here. I can just see the bubbles or the splashes of the rainfall, and I think this is wonderful. I put my umbrella down a little bit later on as I try and pass through some more thick trees. I then put it up again and I'm sure I see the flash of someone else's umbrella. It's a white coloured one held up quite high. It's probably about 7 or 8 feet tall and it's kind of just stood there motionlessly, and I think maybe somebody's under there smoking or something. I'm pretty sure I can see a glowing ember of something which is red coloured. And I think I see 2, so I think there's probably a couple of people smoking over here. Now, I keep going though, and again, I hear the piano sound. I think this is really weird, but I'm certain it's behind me. It sounds like it's probably about 20 minutes south of where I just come from, so there's no real reason to panic here. So off we go. I'm not able to actually reach the other person with the umbrella because they're on the other side of the water, but I can certainly see them. I can't see the embers anymore, so I think that they're probably just standing there, maybe waiting out the rain. But that's the first revelation. Where they're standing should be really difficult to get to. They're basically on a big island thing, but I don't see any boats, and you're not supposed to dock over there. It's to do with disturbing the wildlife and stuff, but this is weird. As I walk along the water, I am constantly expecting to find some kind of evidence of a boat or at least something to explain all of this, but nothing comes up. So I don't really know. It did actually make me somewhat uneasy. I'm someone who's quite proud of being brave in these situations, but I didn't feel so good now. Again, nothing to worry about. Just another crack in the simulation, I say to myself. At the time I was quite big into the simulation theory, and I thought this was just all a weird part of it. I'm still noticing that there's markings on the trees, but I'm not making too much of it now. I've almost grown used to it. Now that's when I noticed something was definitely different. I was still hearing the piano sound, but I was so fixated on what was going on the other side of the lake that I didn't think anything of it. When I realise it, I actually feel fear quite strongly. I know now that if I continue where I am for about 2 miles or so, I'm probably going to reach civilization and a road, so I think, yeah, we've got ahead for that. I'm actually growing a little bit worried now. But eventually, the piano sound stops. I do turn back to see if the person with the umbrella is still on the island, and I then realise that they've moved. The umbrella hasn't moved in terms of how high up it is, but the position has. It seems like they've just stood at the very end of the shoreline, trying their best not to be seen by me. It was definitely a bit creepy now. I just don't know why somebody would want to be there, or why they seem to be almost following me. I mean, there's a good chance that they didn't see me. I mean, my raincoat's pretty dark coloured, and so are all of my clothes and my umbrella, so it's going to be hard to see me if you were trying. And yeah, maybe it was just a person standing at the edge of the shoreline, just observing like I was. I mean, God, it's probably another me, but I don't think too much about that. And I continue as I'm probably about 500 meters away from relative safety again. Feeling a lot better about things, I decide just to continue on and let the scary thoughts slowly leave my mind. Now I get closer to more man-made stuff, and again I feel good, but something felt very different here. Everything looks kind of odd. It's almost like you found the remnants of where something once was, in terms of lots of stone buildings with stone walls, and they don't look like they're from recently. They must have been from hundreds of years ago. I thought, wow, I've never realised this place is here. But I think, yeah, this is probably just how it was, and I never noticed it. But I noticed that's weird. I see some large rocks which seem to have just been placed there balanced, which again is odd. Now this is where it gets a bit creepy. There was a fog which come on very acutely and pretty much blocked all of my vision, and the vision into the different areas surrounding here. I don't know if any of you have ever played the Silent Hill game, but it was kind of like that, where you're walking through the fog, and you can't really see far in front of yourself and everything looks the same. I didn't seem to be getting anywhere in particular, which was quite frightening. I looked up and I was sure I just saw the exact same view I had before. I did actually start to panic a bit now, as I was very confused as to what was happening. Then once again, there's that familiar piano sound which I just cannot make out. Where is it coming from? Why is this happening to me? And I'm met with another flyer looking thing on the tree. I know I'd kind of half dabbled with the idea of the simulation theory, but this is actually really scaring me now. The rain doesn't seem to be so loud too, but I think this is just from the fear. It was like my brain had shut out the normal sounds to try and pick up on the abnormal or something, and I keep going. I'm kind of picking up a fast pace, and I can't stop thinking of how much this is like that game I'd played. I almost wondered if I'd actually fell asleep at the console, and I was actually playing it still, but I obviously wasn't. That's when I noticed something else weird. There seems to be bats. Now there are no bats in this area whatsoever, but I can see 3 or 4 on another island further up. They're just flying around like bats do, but why on earth were they here? There are literally none. There shouldn't be anything. Now the piano sound had stopped, but I still seemed to be walking through the remnants of almost like an uncovered ancient civilization with only stoned remains. This is too weird. It's still very difficult to see because of the fog and whatnot, but off I go. I have to keep pressing forward to try and get out of here. And that's when I feel something. I felt like sweat beaded off my head, and for a second I closed my eyes. Bizarrely though, a second that I do that, I seem to have, for only maybe 2 seconds, but a perfectly clear kind of like drone shot of myself, or bird's eye view. It was so weird, it was just like that video game. I'm now very convinced that maybe I fell asleep or something and I was playing the game, and I try my best to wake myself up, but I just can't seem to. I then go and splash my face with some of the lake water, and that seems to help, but it assures me that I'm in fact awake. I've never seen anything like it before. Now what really creeped me out is I was able to see round a corner that I shouldn't have been able to unless I had a drone footage shot, just what I'd seen in my head. Now as I'm walking, suddenly the fog seems to clear up. I mean honestly, it was like being at the edge of a cloud. I look up and things are how they should be. I look back and I just see the fog and I think, wow, I must have got really lost in there. I start to run through the possibilities in my head, but none seem to make logical sense, so I just walk on like normal. Now I didn't see anyone for a while, until suddenly bang. There's a big sudden populous area, and life and the sounds of it are all there like they should be. So where did I just come from? Now I'd love to say this is where that all stopped, but it doesn't. Let me take you on a journey into something that really scares me. So, all is pretty much normal after that for a number of years. And so I'm sitting down in the park cafe that we've got with one of my other friends who's also a ranger here. He then tells me, "Hey, I thought we turned off the radio." I say, "Yeah, we did." He then says, "No, did you hear it?" I say, "What?" Honestly completely forgetting about what happened before. "It's a piano sound." I then look at him very confused and I hear it too. It makes me jolt and I actually spill some of my coffee because of it, how hard I've shuddered. There is in fact a piano sound coming from outside which is just like what I've heard before. My friend then tells me that he's never heard this and I explain my story. He then looks concerned and that's where that ended at that time. So everything basically goes on like normal now and I'm really freaked out by this. But it doesn't stop here. I was on a family vacation where we stayed in a cabin somewhere and I went out fishing with my brother and then I hear it again, the piano sound. I say, "Come on, you've got to hear that," but my brother can't hear it and I really think that I'm going insane. Then he tells me that he hears it too. We had a truly good search for the source of the sound, but we couldn't find anything. I mean, we were probably out there searching for God knows how long, but we didn't find a thing. Literally nada. Nothing. And it really annoyed me. I say, "Thank God you heard that. I thought I was going insane." I then tell my brother about how many times I've heard this sound, and he then asks me about where do I work specifically. He then tells me that he's heard that apparently some of it's native land, and that there's supposedly spirits that haunt there, and if you don't bless the area when you go in, or give some kind of offering, then scary things can happen. Apparently people hear their own voice echoed to them calling for help, or speaking complete gibberish out in the woods. He tells me that we should probably leave now, and we do go back to the cabin. I went in the cabin though. I'm just about to fall asleep for the night, and I hear the sounds of maybe hundreds of ping pong balls getting thrown at the side walls. I just think to myself, what on earth is that? And think that it's some of the children there just playing a trick on me, and ended up falling asleep. But oh no, I woke up and asked about it, and nobody seems to know a thing. So I was definitely unhappy now. This was supposed to be a really fun family getaway, but it was turning into most of a nightmare for me. But what can I do? I guess I'm the crazy one. So a couple of years passed by and life moves pretty quickly, and I had my first son. Everything was going really well, and I'm invited to go on a camping trip with one of my friends. I was very excited for this, and unfortunately, my buddy decided to back out just as we were about to start up the thing, but I decided to keep going. We're actually quite far from where I live, or at least where we plan to go together, but it's not an issue. I didn't know the area too well, but everything's as it should be, and I'm gathering wood for my fire. Now I get everything there, and as soon as I light up the fire, there's some kind of strange feeling. It doesn't feel like I'm being followed, it doesn't feel like I'm being chased, but it kind of felt like deja vu, you know? Almost like I was repeating actions which I'd done before. It was very odd. I would have jumped to blame it on the simulation before, but I didn't really believe in that stuff now. So as I get my firewood and start throwing it on the fire, I just feel really uneasy now. It was strange, it was kind of like the feeling of being in a dream or something, and I do feel my fear starting to rise. And it takes me a little while as I start to calm myself down and not panic at anything that's happening, which now is extremely difficult for me to do. I tell myself to just shut up and go for a walk. I've got into the habit of telling myself to shut up sometimes when my mind is racing, and I find that it helps me a lot. So I keep going, and eventually get far enough away that I can just about see my campfire. And I suddenly felt something in my body. It was like an instinct took over, and I turn and start running back towards the camp. It was only when I got back into my tent and zipped it up for the night that I start to feel relaxed. I start to read a book, and then As if my soul was pierced, I hear it. The key of an off-tuned piano once more. Now I actually dropped the book in fear. Now, it's been about 5 hours since this has happened and I've not slept, and day has broke now and woke me up, and I'm writing this on my phone. I don't know what is happening or why this seems to be following me, but I know it's not all in my head because others have heard it. I just don't know what to do to make it stop. Now, my fiance first encountered this thing in 2013. Him and his friends were on a camping trip in the middle of the woods in Maine. Literally middle of nowhere. No houses, really nothing for miles. They had a small fire going, but due to rain, it was hard to keep it going. They kept hearing something trying to creep up on them, but it was a kind of noise that sounded like it was big, but on 2 feet. They started throwing rocks in the direction that they heard the footsteps, and suddenly there was a horrifying scream. None of them had actually heard anything like it before. He describes it as though something sounded like a fox but more human. It went crashing through the woods clumsily, but trying to come back almost. They had to fend it off with rocks for most of the night. The second time was about 1 or 2 years later. He went on a solo camping trip in Vermont since it was something he enjoyed, and then heard the exact same blood-curdling scream that he heard the first time. He was just sitting alone in the dark, just basically staring into the fire, when suddenly the scream comes back again. This time, without hesitation, he picks up everything that he needs, packs up and goes home. The third time was tonight. He was supposed to go out to my car to grab us a couple of bottles of water when he heard voices. Due to us recently having someone coming onto our property and stealing from our landlords, we were actually paranoid of this. Now, he went out to investigate. He calls me and tells me to let the dog out. As he was sneaking around, the voices turned to a snarling sound. He quickly stopped, turned off his flashlight, dropped to the ground, and the dog was standing next to him. Suddenly he sees 2 glowing eyes and it lunges at him. The dog gets excited and starts chasing it. The whole time they're chasing it, it's screaming and running faster than our dog. Even though he was running with a flashlight, he couldn't make out the shape of its body. He says how far apart the eyes were make it seem very large, but he can't really get a shape of it. It seems discoloured and somewhat distorted. It kept looking back at him while he chased it, and its eyes were just glowing while it screamed. Our dog chased it off into the woods, but luckily she came back. I think it was trying to lure him in there by making the sound similar to what the dog did. But he couldn't make out the height either because it went from squatting to standing and running. God knows what this thing was. I was a child living on a gravel road in southern Ohio in the late 1950s to early 1960s. At times, my grandmother would tell me to get to the front porch, saying they're coming, she'd say. Soon, about 30 or so Civil War soldiers in blue would walk by the house in broad daylight, totally physical, actually kicking up rocks and stuff on the road, talking amongst themselves. Some in small groups and some alone, uniforms torn and dirty. They never responded to us. They just walked on, behind our barn and over the hill. This happened many times over the years. Now, I didn't know what to think of it, though later on, I saw a documentary on the Civil War and learned that those soldiers often walked home hundreds of miles. Many didn't survive the walk actually. I always wondered if they were trying to get back home or something. Now the following is a series of weird things that happened to me that I truly can't explain. Now what annoys me most about this is that I've tried to tell people my experience and they kind of just laugh it off. Actually, I told one of my colleagues at work today. I work as a forest server fire patrol person, but when I told them my story, they kind of just laughed at me and said, "Oh yeah, is that really what happened?" And that really annoys me. And this is supposed to be someone that's quite similar and that I'd actually consider a friend there, and also had weird experiences before, so I just don't get it. People are so eager to hear what you say, but then they're so happy and quick to dismiss everything. I just don't get it. But let's dive into my story, and hopefully at least a few of you will understand. Now, emotionally, I wasn't really the same after this. I don't know why. I'm not a spiritual person, and I don't really believe in religion much, but this kind of made me think about what else is really out there. Where I live, there can be lots of snow all the time, but I love to go on my little adventures, and there was a forest that was supposedly haunted near where I lived. Now, I'd heard quite a few things about this place, and apparently you'll hear screams in the night, you'll see headless people wandering around, and I guess just the works really. Now, I'd actually been here on 2 occasions before. One was when I drove out with one of my friends, but to be honest, it was just the biggest waste of time. I mean, literally nothing happened. We were driving for a long time to get there, and basically nothing happened, and we just get bored and come back. So I wasn't expecting too much in the second time that I'd been there. Again, nothing had happened, but in more recent times, I'd moved much closer and thought, why not go? Also, there was quite a nice snowfall, so I thought this was pretty cool. I really like going on adventures at night time like this, especially when the elements are involved. For whatever reason, it kind of makes me feel almost like I'm in a movie, especially if I've got my AirPods with me and I just listen to songs, and it really creates a vibe. I always found it empowering, but yeah. So I set out at night, and I walked towards the forest off of the main path, and it's really dark. The stars are looking absolutely beautiful above me, and luckily there's no cars coming, so I just get off and straight into where the forest starts. There was probably about 30 meters of snow or whatnot before it actually starts. Then you're hit by lots of trees. Now I turn my flashlight on, and suddenly I can see really well. I had a really powerful one that was actually adapted for cameras and stuff. I was actually joking with one of my friends, it's like turning on the daytime and there's nothing to be scared of. And I also said that this probably scares away the spirits more than anything. They probably think it's God. I think of these jokes as I can see my breath in front of me from the cold. Now, it's kind of like the snow that's fallen quite quickly to the ground, almost like it's kind of sleet, but it's not. It's still snowing. I notice it as I take my first steps into the forest. I have some pretty skinny trees on either side of me when I see something that looks odd. I can see what appears to be a white silhouette to my left when suddenly it vanishes. I'm a little confused by this, but suddenly I realise that it must be my breath from where I've got my scarf and things. I think it's a little odd, and I tell myself just to relax a bit, and I keep walking. The trees are kind of like overarching here, and it actually looks really beautiful. I do notice one odd thing. There seems to be footprints that lead off from the main trail, but they kind of look like hoof shapes. I thought maybe some kind of animal went through here, or God knows what. It couldn't have been horse riding because the branches are actually too low. To give you an idea, they're probably about 8 feet above me or dropping down to 5, so you'd have to duck sometimes. Now these aren't nice branches too. They're the kinds that come snagged on each other, and if you make one loose, it's going to kind of whip you in the face. And I didn't want to lose my eyes. But it wasn't too much of an issue really. So when I set off, I didn't really have a direction or place that I wanted to go to. I heard there was an old church that used to be here, and I thought, you know what, that would be pretty cool if I can find that. Who knows what would happen if I go there on my own. Now at the time, I was certain no other people around because I literally can't hear anything or see anyone. A really good telling sign is the fact that there's no lights. You kind of need lights to see where you're going out here, but I literally couldn't see any. Every so often, I look off into the woods and I don't see anything. I did notice 1 or 2 strange sounds, but they didn't happen too frequently. I know that there's lots of animals out here because of my normal line of work, and just I guess from having some good sense about my surroundings, so I didn't let it put me off. I knew I had to be careful of certain animals out here because I guess some could hunt at night, but I was going to be far bigger and they wouldn't dare go to me. The sky almost looks like a beautiful orangey colour above me because of my torch, and I think that's really pretty. I do start to feel the cold a bit now, so decide to pick up the pace. Another interesting thing is there's lots and lots of footprints on this path which have been here earlier, and I think that's a little bit bizarre because usually people don't hum here too often. I'm very used to going out here and there's no one around, so that was interesting. As I'm walking, the snow's now going directly into my face and it actually made it a bit annoying, to be honest. I stopped for a moment to try and figure out the direction of it so I can try and avoid it when I hear a howling off. Now I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but there seems to be another little trail where you can cut through going off of the main path, but I decide not to follow it just in case. I was kind of expecting to run into some crazy dog walker or something, but they never showed up, so I think this is a little bit odd. Eventually I come up to one of the trail signs and I can see some of the wildlife that lives here, and I think to myself, well, there's definitely nothing that's going to hunt me, as it's just birds and things like that. But I do wonder what the sound is that I heard. Now, I go a little bit further along and eventually the snow picks up even more now. It felt a little bit different and almost like the weather had become more hostile now. Again, I'm not a spiritual person, but it almost started to feel a bit more like the air was different here. Now, the only way I can describe what I was seeing if you haven't been in the woods at night in the snow is everything sort of looks like an infinite dream. It's almost like somebody's made an unlimited map of just forest, snow, woods, and it's just going to keep on going forever. You do have to be careful out here though, because if you really go off the path, then you don't want to be stuck out in the cold like this. As you can imagine, trying to get a fire going is not easy at the best of times, let alone here. As I'm thinking of this, I hear sounds up above again. I can hear somebody scurrying through the tree line. Well, at least that's what I think it is. And I pause for a second, and I go to switch my flashlight with one that has more of a focus beam. And I kid you not, as this is happening, I can see what appears to be a really small kind of lanky armed person scurrying through the woods. And I take a moment to figure out what this is. I quickly flicker on my other light, which is more powerful, and I don't see anything, so I just put it down to my mind going a little bit loose. I do have to say, I've never seen anything like this, and I think this is really weird. Annoyingly, my eyes didn't adjust well enough in the darkness to actually see this thing, and I have tried telling this part to some other people, but again, they all just say, oh yeah, it's just a rabbit. But I mean, come on, I've seen rabbits, and this thing had lanky arms. I can only describe it as if a person was about 3 feet tall, had a very large torso, and very long skinny arms that dragged the floor. But I don't know where they've gone. I tried looking around for more footprints, but I can't see anything, and this gives me a little bit of adrenaline to pick up the pace. I knew I'd gone out here hoping to find some ghosts and things, but now I wasn't so sure if I actually wanted to find them or not. Now again, I can see a mist form just in front of me, then slowly disappear again. It was a white mist, and it's really like somebody's just breathed in front of me and then vanished. I try and replicate how I was standing a few moments ago and pace backwards and start breathing more heavily to see if it was me, but there's nothing there. Pretty confused at this point, but I decided to just pick up the pace more. Now, I had one other scary experience before from being out in the woods I can think of now, but this was more to do with an animal than anything supernatural. I remember I'd gone somewhere and a big old moose appeared and it was extremely close to me. For whatever reason, it didn't really take notice of me, it just looked at me for a second, but I remember that scared me. But that feeling that I had was kind of beginning to loom over me, and I started to wonder if maybe there was a large animal like that around. Now this is when I noticed the first strange structure. It's something that I hadn't realised before. It's a large wooden structure that looks like 3 trees, kind of in a Stonehenge shape, but a little bit less spread out. This is really weird. It's like they've been carved by hand and placed upright. And what was really bizarre is that there isn't much snow in the middle. It seems like the ground is staying particularly dry here, and not snow forming. Now, I think this is really bizarre because, well, where I am there shouldn't be anything like this. I would have been aware of it too, and I don't understand why I'd never noticed it before. It now becomes apparent that I'm not actually on the main path. I switch off my flashlight once more, and I just take a few seconds to take in everything. I'm trying to give my eyes some time to adjust to the darkness, and I look down at my battery. It's dropped down to 40% on the main flashlight thing, and that's a bit of a worry. Batteries drain pretty quick in the cold, and now I notice that there's more of the mist forming up ahead of me. I actually take a second just to assess what this actually is, but I can't figure out what it is. It's almost like a group of people standing there, kind of just like breathing or talking normally, but there's no one around, and it only seems to be spawning in a specific spot. Now, I once more get closer and try and figure out what this is, but I just can't. Now it reminds me of a story of what one of my other Fire Ranger friends had told me about. Sorry to go off topic, but I think it's important because it might have been linked to what I saw. Now, one of my good friends had been working in the service for quite a number of years, and he would always try and prank us and pretend there was scary things out there. We never believed him, and sometimes he would actually get us with Halloween masks and stuff, and that was pretty creepy. But I remember one day that he come up to us and he looked very freaked out. He said, "Guys, I saw something and I don't know what it is." We ask him to elaborate, and he refuses for a while, but because I'm good friends with him, eventually he decides to tell me what he saw. Apparently, he thought he saw a fire, so he went over to investigate it. Apparently it was just a small red cherry glow, but that could be the start of something. Just as he got to where it was, it suddenly went out, and there was a very big mist that appeared, which is like a smoky white colour. It almost looked like there was a huge fire in terms of the amount of smoke, but nothing was burning. He said it stayed here for literally 3 or 4 minutes as he stared at this bewildered, until eventually it just vanishes. Now the reason that I'm telling you this is because it was incredibly similar to what I saw, in terms of how he described it, the way that it moved, the slight opaqueness of it, everything was just weird. I stood there for what must have been about a good 4 minutes before eventually I decided that, yeah, I'm probably going to have to press through this now. I couldn't be waiting around here all day, and I decided to be brave and walk through it. I actually held my breath just before I did so because I didn't know if it was maybe some kind of dangerous chemical or something that had leaked out, but there wasn't anything. I eventually make it through after what felt like ages, to be honest, and I was actually gasping for breath. It probably took me a good 20 seconds to get through this. Eventually when I do, I turn around to try and figure out where it had gone, and I can't see it. I do think that I can see something just moving off into the distance, but I can't be sure. It was almost like a group of people had vanished, but one of them had just went off into the woods. Now, I'm a little bit freaked out, but again, I was here alone, so there's not really too much I can think of this. Now, I do notice something else very weird. There seems to be lots of really bizarre shaped footprints going off in different directions. They're all kind of like the hoof shaped, like the thing I'd seen earlier, but they're really far spread apart, like something quite tall had been walking. But it's walking as though that it's in complete arrogance to the trees that are there, like they don't exist. And again, I don't know what kind of animal could have done this. Now I walk on. I haven't really got a direction this time. I just know that I need to keep going. I have a feeling that I'm in a bad spot, and that's when I see something. This time I was certain that I was seeing something that was actually there. It was very far away, but I can only describe this as something which is completely black, with these white tusk arm things that was about 4 feet tall that hops around. I only saw this for a couple of seconds and it vanishes, but it's probably the scariest part of the encounter for me. I don't want to describe it as like a demonic thing because again I'm not spiritual, but I don't really know what this was. It's like a really weird creature that would stand awkwardly and almost like it was just bent out too far and shouldn't be balanced, but it was. I flash on both the lights at the same time searching for it, but again, I don't see anything. I then realise that I'm not too far from a lake that I'm actually familiar with, and that's when I noticed a strange glow coming from the other side of it. Now, it was kind of like a glow of like a power plant would give, I guess, in the horizon. Almost like heat waves of light just emanating out slowly, again in the white colour, but almost having more of an energy to it. I decide that I have to investigate. Now, I was actually stupidly close to the shoreline now, because one slip, one twisted ankle, and I could go through the ice and no one would get me here. I'd die of hypothermia before rescuers could find me, but the sense of adventure had taken over. I turn my light around again, and I can't see anything. For a second, I'm sure I can make out the faint glow of 2 eyes, but I don't know if this is just an animal, so I'm not too worried. There's also strange sounds coming from over where that the light is, and it's almost like lots of people talking played backwards, really far off, really far, like barely audible, but I could hear it. The forest was pretty quiet at this time, and I think it made it worse. I'm constantly flashing around with my lights, trying to just get whatever this is to show up more, but I can't see anything. Now, I know some people are asking me, why wasn't I more scared of that weird thing I'd seen? And to be honest, I can't tell you that. It was almost like I was drawn into something, and a mixed personality had taken over where I was seeing weird things and they weren't welcoming, but they weren't worrying for whatever reason, like I had to go on further. I decided that I need to keep up my pace now, but I have some pretty good thoughts and I think, well, I don't want to fall in the water and die, so I go off now. At this part, the trees are a lot thicker than before, and that was a bit more reassuring. But that lake, I'm constantly hearing sounds from over where that lake is, and I just cannot for the life of me figure out what they are. I actually can't remember the sounds too well, and I don't know if it was because I was in a bit of a heightened state during the experience, but I just remember there were weird sounds, like scratching and things like that. Now I know it could have easily been a group of people on drugs or God knows what, but given the weather conditions, I think that's extremely unlikely. Again, this is something one of my incredible colleagues told me that that's what this could have been, and joking that it was green men and aliens, but I don't understand it, because again, these people are so interested to hear what I was saying, and maybe they're denying it because they're scared of what I'm telling them, or just refuse to believe it, but that annoyed me. And I've always been somebody who has the ability to break down the physics of things. If something has happened, I don't immediately go to the irrational explanation. I think with a scientific mind, but it failed me this day, because I can't come up with much for what was happening to me. Now I continue on as the snow gets a little bit thicker now. I think the reason for this might have been because there weren't as many thin trees blocking out all of the snow to capture it. just quite a few big ones with more space in between, but it did actually make my legs hurt. I noticed my knees are quite cold, so my remedy for this is once again to pick up the pace. I clear some of the snow that's actually settled on me, and I actually feel a bit better now. There's quite a big drop off down to the lake now, and I realise that I'm going uphill. What was weird though is that I haven't been to this area before, and I can't really find it. Even since I've been back to the forest again, I've never been able to find this exact spot. Now, it was like somebody had described the area that I was in to somebody else, and they'd tried to make it but not done it exactly the same, and you kind of know deep down that you're not in exactly the same place, but there's enough familiarity for you to feel confident in the situation. Now, as I get closer to the light that I could see, I realised that this definitely isn't the moonlight, because it was kind of flickering like it had an electrical energy to it, and was kind of flashing around into the clouds a little bit. Not like lightning, but kind of like the northern lights, and that was what I find really bizarre. Just the whole energy of whatever this was is like nothing that I've ever seen before. A little bit scared now, I start to slowly pan around trying to see anything, but I can't find a thing. Every so often I hear sounds of movement behind me, but I can't be sure what this is. I decide that I just need to keep it moving, and that was one of the things that made me feel more safe in this situation now. I eventually come up onto the bend and I start approaching towards where the light is directly now. Now again, I'm not too scared or shy of adventures, so I have to keep pressing forward one step at a time. I do notice something odd, and that's that there aren't any steps up here. I know people might not have gone here in the daytime, but it does seem weird because there was just so many earlier that I'd seen pretty much everywhere. The snow had actually slowed down a little bit, and it wasn't as abrasive on my face, and this was quite nice. My nose and toes always seem to suffer, especially in the cold, along with my hands. I think I have a problem where they don't have very good blood, or they just seem to switch off in the cold, but it made the going a little bit tough and less comfortable. Now, had I found the ghost that I was looking for? Not just yet. So I decide that I need to go towards the light. But again, the way that the light is kind of bouncing off the clouds, almost like it's the northern lights, was just really strange. I was incredibly drawn into this, almost like I was looking at a hypnotist's watch. It was incredibly beautiful, but just really weird. I didn't know if it was related to an electrical storm, but it wouldn't really make sense for me. I have seen something bizarre while working on the service, so again, a little bit similar to this. I remembered one time that I was working, I was actually in the station and I just made myself a coffee. I went to step outside and had a look around at the sky at night just because it's so beautiful, and I do notice something odd. There's almost like a large blue electrical ball of light in the sky. It's opaque and not really visible, and it only lasted for a few seconds, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. A few of my colleagues had actually reported seeing it as well while on duty at the exact same time that I did. And this kind of had the same characteristics, but it wasn't identical. But I want to find out what this is, and I wasn't as scared as I was before. Now the closer I get, there's something else I notice which is pretty bizarre, and that's that the sky seems to be kind of imitating this very loosely. It's almost like somebody turned on a pulse of electricity through the clouds above me. It's almost like the northern lights are above the whole sky now, but extremely faint, but the same colour as the clouds, so again it's almost like they were pulsating a bit. I did get scared because there's an eye condition that someone in my family has, which is actually a little bit similar to this, but I've been tested for it multiple times since and after this event, and it's always come up clear. But in the moment, I was pretty scared because I really worry about having issues with my vision. Now, luckily it turned out it wasn't my eyes, and I quickly did some tests by looking at the ground and things that weren't moving to realise that nothing was off. But why was the sky moving? I wasn't so sure what was happening, but I wasn't that far away now from where I needed to be. That's when I noticed another wooden structure. It's similar to what I've seen before, but it kind of formed more of a hexagon type of shape. Every so often I would see these on either sides of the trail, and they seemed to be increasing in frequency as I got closer to the light. I only saw about 3 more of them, but again, never seen it since. I stop for a moment, and I can see my breath on my light as I take my mask down just to try and get a better feel of what was happening. I shine the torch around, but again, I don't see much of anything. Don't know what I was expecting to see. I've just got the glow dead ahead of me now, and I know I have to get there. It's not much longer now before I'm there, so at least I've got that to look forward to, and I can eventually start heading back. I'm not sure how far I'd actually come at this point, but I've probably been walking for about a good 50 or 60 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but usually you'll feel it more than I was in this situation, because walking in the snow is actually really difficult sometimes, and the cold can kind of zap out all of your energy. Now, I'm not too far away from where this is, and I can hear the voices again. It sounds like whispering. I can make out the odd word or two, but nothing seems to be in a language that I understand. It's definitely in a language though, and it hasn't increased in volume or anything since when I first heard it earlier. I don't know if it was there the whole time because I kind of just zoned out to it, but I suddenly noticed it much more than I had done earlier. And again, this is pretty weird to me because, like I said, I've never heard anything like it, and it is a bit creepy. Now, I eventually come up to the last clearing where the light should be, and I'm quite excited to get here. There seems to be lots of footsteps here everywhere, so I'm pretty convinced that I've made it back onto the main path now. I've got a good feeling now, and I know that there must be somebody there, so I feel pretty happy. So, what do? Take my steps around it. I can definitely hear the voices on the right side of me now, and I keep stopping every couple of seconds to approximate exactly where it is. Every so often I see movement up ahead of me, and I'm convinced that it's people out here now, so I feel much more relaxed and reassured. I'm now going down the last straight part that I have to go to, with the trees kind of forming an arch above me, and the snow still everywhere around me. Now, some people have asked me why did I keep going and what was I actually doing out there. That was my friends at work earlier, and I don't know. I guess it kind of felt like I'd been there for too long and I was at least going to get something out of it, and yeah. So, I continue up and I eventually find where the clearing is, and I realise that I've only got about another 20 feet of a walk to figure out what this is, and I can see movement again. I decide that the best thing to do in this situation is just to slowly sneak up on who or whatever it is up ahead of me. Now yes, I've got them, I think. I can see some more lights ahead too. I'd see 2, then 3, then they go out. I don't have my light on at this point because I want the element of surprise. The snow is coming against me, but not directly in my face, so this is pretty pleasant. Now, I come up to where I can hear the voices finally getting louder and louder, and my excitement is growing. It feels like I've been here for too long trying to figure out what is actually going on, and I'm gonna get my taste of it soon. I am kind of looking over my shoulder every so often though, because I do hear sounds like I'm being followed. Again, I keep thinking I'm seeing movement, but there's not much of anything when I focus, so I try not to think of it. I don't actually have my torch on now, so I can't verify the fact that there's nothing there, But again, I just presumed it was people. And I thought, well, they haven't said anything to me, and I'm not disturbing them, so why are they going to be annoyed at me? It was almost like an overconfidence, and eventually, I come up to the tree line and the clearing. I start going a lot slower now as I get closer and closer to where I can hear them all. Now the chanting is still illegible, and I take my first step up, and I look around and I can see what must be hundreds of people all standing around the edge of some kind of clearing. They've all got their hands raised up and they're making some weird chanting sound. Now they're not actually that close to me, so it's pretty difficult to make out how tall they are, but these things seem really small. I say things because I don't know if they were people unless they were on their knees, but that's what it looked like. I start to shake a little bit as I feel a lot more like I'm in danger now. I decide that I'm gonna slowly turn my flashlight on for a second and figure out what this actually is. My eyes adjust more and more to the darkness every couple of seconds, and I notice something wrong. They don't look like normal people. The shape of them's all wrong and their arms are too long, and they're all either wearing some white things on their arms, but it looks very pointy, just like the things I'd seen earlier. I try as best I can to slowly flicker on the torch, but I cannot do it. Again, I start shaking more and more and try and press it, but nothing happens. I keep on and on flicking until eventually it flashes on, and for a split second I can see these things. They're like very dark small creatures with weird pointy arms, all facing up to the sky making some weird sounds. Their mouths are what really scare me. It's like just a circle with lots of jagged teeth. And just as I'm taking this all in, they suddenly vanish, and so does the sounds. I quickly fire the torch around everywhere trying to see where they've gone, but I can't see anything. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears like a constant rhythmic drum. And then, a few moments later, I hear movement, rustling and the sounds as though hundreds of people are all coming towards me suddenly, and I take off. I turn my torch on and quickly dart up ahead of myself, constantly looking over my shoulder with the torch. What I have just seen, I don't know, but I knew that I was in danger and had to get out of there. Luckily, I can retrace my footprints for most of the journey until I get away from the clearing. I can hear the sounds are still coming after me, just much slower than me, but they're still coming. I stop for a second and fire the torch around everywhere but can't see anything, and I drop it. Now, I managed to drop it not only into the snow, but face first, and that also means there's no light illuminating back at me, it's kind of buried. Just as I say to myself, you've got to be kidding me, I can hear something else not far up ahead of me. So I take off. Thank God I actually brought the other torch with me, because I'm absolutely certain at the fact that I would have had cardiac arrest otherwise. Now, the only problem I've got is the other torch isn't that easily accessible right now. I put it away when I was trying to hide and be not heard, but now I'm starting to think that wasn't really a good idea. And because I've had this on and so close to my face, I haven't really adjusted to the dark, and I don't know where I'm going. I used to be quite good at long distance cross country, so I have that in my favour. But I soon realise those years are way behind me, and I come up to a point where there's two paths. One's much smaller and seems untrodden but should be closer to where I need to get to. The other is what seems to be closer to where the light is, and I have to choose the latter. Now I take off down this path, and I keep fumbling trying to get the other torch on, but for whatever reason I just can't seem to do it. I don't know if it was for the fact that it was in the cold for too long, but In those moments, it just would not come back to life again, and I'm just hitting it on my palm constantly. Now, it's extremely difficult to navigate in this moment. I think I know where I'm going, but I can't really tell. There's clearly lots and lots of different footprints on this path, and I can't tell if they're normal or not because I was rushing so much, but it gives me some reassurance that I must be going in a relatively good direction to escape whatever this is. Now, I should mention at this point that the sounds are long gone. I'd absolutely blitzed something that seemed like it couldn't go much quicker than a light walking pace, but it didn't matter. I don't know what was chasing me or why. I don't know what I'd just disturbed. Eventually, I flick my torch on again, and I illuminate the rest of the way back. I turn it off again quickly because I'm not sure how good the battery is and I really needed to conserve it. I stop for a few moments to collect my breath and look around me, and I think I know my bearings now, and I start to walk. The only reason that I had to walk now is because I was so out of breath and exhausted from moving in the snow that I genuinely was going to have to crawl the rest of the way out otherwise. I now make it up to another clearing where I can see the lake. I look around everywhere, and what's really weird, I can't see the light glow that I saw earlier. It's genuinely nowhere. I was convinced that I should still at least be able to see that out of all things, but there's literally nothing. I don't get it. And the sky, it still didn't look right, but it wasn't like before. So where did the light go? I didn't have much time to focus on it, but I was truly perplexed, and this is something that I still think about now. I managed to get my torch on again, and I don't know, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to recharge whatever energy it was and fire it around everywhere, hoping to see the light again, just to know it was there. But again, I don't see anything. Now, I'm pretty spooked out now, but I have to keep going. I eventually make it into a more familiar area, and I'm actually feeling confident finally. I've adopted more of a walking pace because I was a little bit worried that if anyone was out there and I ran up on them, they might think I was trying to attack them. I do stop constantly though, and look around, desperately trying to see something or anything around me, but again, I can't see anything or anyone. I was desperately hoping that I'd see a group of people just to explain what I'd seen, or at least to be able to tell somebody, but I can't see anything. The snow's picked up a little bit more now, and it wasn't pleasant. I realised too that I must have been out of here for quite a long while because the battery's virtually entirely drained on the torch. I know because it's gone pretty dim. I probably have the worst torch in the world because when the battery's low it goes really dim to conserve it, but it doesn't last very long, so what's the point? The other light that I have is far superior, but that's long gone. I decide to leave it for whatever's out there to enjoy it. I know I'm never seeing that thing again. I'm someone who usually hates losing things too, but I was so scared I didn't even think about trying to recover it. Now, the trees are getting thinner and thinner, and that gives me a pretty good idea that I'm not too far away from where I need to be now. I can't be 100% certain that I'm back to safety, but this is a pretty good indicator of it being the case. Now, I continue this walking pace, and I'm constantly looking behind myself. Now, momentarily, I start shaking again and don't know why. Then suddenly, I realise I hear something making a screeching sound. It's kind of at a medium volume, but it sounds like it's coming from exactly behind where I was. I'm not so worried now because with a few steps, I'm eventually back to where the forest ends, and I'm not too far from safety. I look around for anything to have been following me, but I can't see anything, and I quickly make my way over to my car. I start it up, turn the lights on full, and take one last look into the forest, and I can't see anything. I get back into my car and drive the rest of the way home, completely in shock about the whole experience. Now, I really don't know what happened to me that day, and I truly, truly don't like sharing my story with colleagues at work because they don't really listen to me. But I know what I saw, and I don't know what it was. It could have been spiritual, it could have been anything, but I sure as hell don't have a clue what that was, and that scares me